Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm so pleased to see so many students here today. So please be seated. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to the 2025 CAPRI Annual Forum, Building Resilience on Shaky Ground in Asia Pacific. Indeed, you're in Taipei. I know at least 50 of you are here for the first day in Taiwan. The ground could become shaky. I'm delighted to see so many of you here with us in Taipei and thank the global online audience for tuning in to what will be a thought-provoking forum. We're also pleased to announce that we have over 100 students from 4 continents attending the forum in person. Over the next 4 hours, we will hear from experts in a variety of disciplines, discussing some of the most pressing challenges we face in what has already been a very eventful year. Topics will range from the nurturing of research at a time of reduced cross-border collaboration, how the private sector can lead on solving some of the society's biggest sustainability challenges, and what needs to be done to shore up economic resilience in the region. Our speakers assemble here from across Asia, Europe, North America, and the Pacific are some of the finest minds from their fields, and I look forward to hearing their insights. Their thoughts on these topics could not be timelier. In the past 5 months, we have witnessed the dismantling of the international economic and geopolitical order as the Trump administration has set out its America First principles. This instability has created significant turbulence to markets, ruptured diplomatic relations, and done away with America's reputation as the defender of democracies across the globe. For generations, many of Asia-Pacific's economies have focused on building their export capabilities, secure in the knowledge that their security needs were covered by an American government who encouraged flourishing middle-sized economies as a bulwark against the rising influence of China. It appears, for the time being at least, that this era is over, and the region will need to quickly find its grounding in a new global economy. However, in the long term, there are many opportunities in the Asia-Pacific region to assert itself on the global stage, filling some of the vacuum left by international retreat of the United States. As we will hear in today's discussions, in many instances, the region is already taking the steps to improve its resilience and offers examples to be adopted elsewhere in the world. Taipei City is establishing itself as a bastion of innovation and resilience, drawing in talent from across the world who wish to work in its thriving technology sector, for example. Partnerships are springing up across the Pacific, strengthening health systems in some of the most climate-vulnerable locations on the planet. And I'm proud to add that CAPRI is another example of the Asia-Pacific stepping up to address cross-border challenges in this time of uncertainty. Our multidisciplinary research, combining in-house researchers and a global network of experts, many of whom are here with us today, drives impactful policy to address the most critical challenges of today and tomorrow. At a time when many NGOs are facing cutbacks or political backlash, CAPRI is steadfast in its work to enhance global resilience and promote innovative policy. It is therefore fitting that our opening keynote speaker, Sir Robin Niblett, will focus on how the region can forge a path through these turbulent times on his very first trip to Taiwan. Sir Robin Niblett is the former director and chief executive of Chatham House, the world-leading policy institute based in London, and a renowned expert and author on relations between Europe, the United States, and Asia. Prior to his 15 years leading Chatham House, Sir Robin was one of the leaders of CSIS in Washington, D.C., where he cultivated his reputation as a foremost expert on transatlantic relations. A chair and member of numerous World Economic Forum councils, Sir Robin has advised several UK governments and testified before the US Congress, and was appointed a Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George. in the Queen's Platinum Jubilee 2022 birthday honors for services to international relations and British foreign policy. His recent research has focused on US-China dynamics in the 21st century. And I'm delighted that Sir Robin will open today's forum with his thoughts on how the Asia-Pacific can navigate the new Cold War between US and China. With that, I hand over the stage to Sir Robin.
With a round of applause, please join me to welcome Sir Robin Niblett. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Shirley. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here at the third forum, CAPRI Forum. You're right, it is my first visit to Taiwan, which strikes me as somewhat inexplicable, but better late than never, as they say. And thrilled to be here with distinguished members of your advisory council, your board, and the other guests who are speaking on the panels after me. I think they might have the easier task on a panel than I have trying to do an opening keynote, but I'm very happy to step up to the challenge you've set for me today. So delighted to be here. How can Asia Pacific navigate, the title says, a new Cold War between the US and China? For those of you who know, I did write a book with that title that I published in March of last year, written in the summer, autumn of 2023. A lot of water has passed under the bridge since then. And maybe I'll be able to allude to some of that when I suggest my thoughts about the future. But what is the Asia Pacific? I don't want to spend too long on this, but I think my recommendations or my thoughts are principally targeted at those liberal democracies that we find in this region, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and of course, Taiwan, New Zealand, there's others as well. But there's only a certain group that I think are picking up the responsibilities that come with being liberal democracies for the long term. And I want to do three things with my roughly 15 minutes I think I've got. I'll do my best to stick to time because I know you've got a lot on your agenda today. First of all, just explain why I think there is a new Cold War. For those of you who are students here, you might know it is a contested concept. And some people would rather, people like me didn't say there is one, because if we say it, maybe it makes it so. But I think it's better to call a spade than to ignore it. Otherwise, we won't be able to react to its challenges. And I think understanding the dynamics that are driving it are important. So that's the first thing I'll talk about. Secondly, we have just entered, I think, the second chapter of the new Cold War with Donald Trump's return to the White House. And his arrival obviously requires adaptation and new responses. And then third, let me just say a few words then about what, given points 1 and 2, what are the options for, in particular, the liberal democracies in Asia Pacific. So starting at the beginning, why is there a new Cold War? I mean, it is a truly geopolitical contest between the United States and China. As Pete Hegseth, the new US Defense Secretary, put it, China is our first peer competitor. Again, for the students here, you will have read all about the Thucydides trap that Professor Graham Allison of Harvard University coined originally back in 2017. A rising power will generally find its way resisted by the established power, and the risk generally, historically, was war. Obviously, today, we live in a nuclear-armed world, and the prospects of war between the great powers become diminished, obviously not zero, but much less, and hence Cold Wars in general. And if you look at the nature of the US-China relationship, the framing in which this competition and this Cold War is taking place covers all of the dimensions of international power and interest. It's an economic Cold War. You've got the two biggest economic countries by nominal GDP in the world's biggest consumer market, the world's biggest export and exporter. But the important thing here is that Americans believe, in general, that China has grown to this position on the back of America, that has not done it simply through its own hard work. And America is now determined to try to stop being a helper and say to China, good luck, but you're not going to do it with us. China, of course, believes, probably correctly, that America wants to prevent China's rise from happening as easily as it was and to contain it economically. It's also a military contest. China, obviously, if it wants to be economically secure as a world's largest exporter, wants to be able to break out of the first island chain that runs from South Korea through Japan, through Taiwan, obviously, to the northern Philippines, in which that means that gaining control of Taiwan is a geopolitical challenge for China, not simply a broader political one. And we've seen China's investment in its navy, the efforts it's making to control the South China Sea, its new investment in nuclear capability and nuclear warheads, heading potentially to match the United States and Russia. And this kind of realization that economic and military strength are absolutely intertwined. And there's probably no better description of that than the way in which China has now become by far the world's largest producer or shipbuilder, producer of shipping tonnage, close to 90% of world tonnage last year. And it is a technological contest between these two powers as well, not only because technology is critical to economic growth, but it's central to what President Xi Jinping talks about as civil-military fusion. The most basic technologies, as well as the most advanced, such as AI, can strengthen a country's military capability. But I want to say that this is also an ideological Cold War. And the reason it's a Cold War, there's an ideological dimension to it. And I don't mean here the contest between communism and capitalism, but it is between top-down, centralized systems of government in which those in power believe that they represent the sovereignty of their country and that there must be no challenge to that central position that they hold, and countries that believe in the kind of creative destruction that comes from bottom-up, more chaotic systems of democratic government. The problem we have is that each side, the United States and China, fears that the other system is a threat to it. If you're in the Chinese leadership, you fear that the US wants to undermine its leadership by spreading democracy around the world, new color revolutions, as they describe it, supporting human rights groups in China, challenging the CCP's legitimacy, always talking about the Chinese people as separate from the Communist Party of China, and supporting human rights activists in general. Complaints about Hong Kong, Xinjiang, etc. In that context, I think they believe that Taiwan, in a way, is being used as a kind of missile of democracy, as I describe it in my book, against the CCP. And so Taiwan is not just part of the geopolitical contest between the US and China, it is also part of the ideological contest between the two countries. Of course, if you're in America, and as Shirley noted, I spent half my career working in Washington. It's not quite America, but it is Washington. American politicians believe that top-down systems of government are inherently unstable eventually. And they end up externalizing their internal sources of insecurity, whether it be through wanting to create buffer zones or trying to undermine the strength of their opponents. And if you look at the whole issue of technology, as I mentioned before, being important in the geopolitical level of the context, technology, of course, is also important in the ideological dimension, not just the way Russia, in particular, has been using misinformation and disinformation to undermine European democracy, but also the extent to which China and its use of bite dances, TikTok technology, is seen as undermining potentially America's democratic and political consistency and integrity. In fact, I think one of the most interesting examples of how this overlay between ideology, technology, and geopolitics come together was Matt Pottinger, the former China advisor in the National Security Council of Trump 1.0, when writing in Foreign Affairs of the one way that they thought they could actually try to move beyond managed strategic competition with China to actually undermining the Communist Party's control over China, he talked about his one idea, as far as I could tell, was breaking the CCP's great firewall around the Chinese internet, and the way that that's been used to kind of try and keep the Chinese people and the Communist Party separate. The US-China contest, of course, really became a Cold War, if I can mention this quickly at the end of my first point, because of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I don't need to go into the details here, but it forced China to pick sides. It picked Russia, even though it hasn't formally broken sanctions, but de facto it seems to be, and certainly if you look at the sanctions imposed by the US and European governments on Chinese companies for supporting dual-use technology, the narrative certainly has been supported by Beijing of this being a defensive war. But what it did was force the Europeans back to relying on America for their security. And it's raised the sense of insecurity in Asia-Pacific allies of America, Japan, South Korea, Australia. They're not just facing China anymore. They're facing China and Russia collectively together. And in fact, China and Russia and North Korea and Iran. And you put that combination of countries together, and it really, if you're sitting in Washington, looks like a rogues gallery, or as has been described by the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, as a new axis of evil. And certainly what we saw towards the tail end of the Biden administration was a knitting together of America's Pacific and Atlantic allies, with prime ministers of Japan, South Korea, Australia attending NATO summits, and the Europeans, as one example, increasingly active in freedom of navigation operations in the Asia-Pacific seas. In a way, the world has been sort of adapting to this new Cold War already in the last couple of years. China, even earlier, I would say, which started its de-risking program back in 2015 with Made in China 2025. The US responded with Trump 1.0, imposing, putting Chinese companies, technology companies on the entity list. Biden then had its small yard and high fence, a limited number of technologies that would be prevented from having access to the US market. Onshoring of production, chips, trying to sort of build up America's economic capability, and the emergence of the G7 as a kind of steering committee for coordinating the positions of both America's Atlantic and Pacific allies towards both China and Russia. But the start of the new Cold War was also notable because it created opportunities for many countries around the world, in particular those countries across the global south that now account for 65% of world population, nearly 30% of world GDP. Those countries have been able to play one side off the other, triangulate between the United States and China, whether it be India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, take your pick, Brazil. They've all done pretty well out of this. We've seen the emergence of continued trade deepening that's crossed the boundaries between the two sides of the Cold War, with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a sort of China at least initiated idea for closer trade relations across the Asia-Pacific. And we had the whole famous China plus one, the idea that companies that got a little bit worried about the Cold War would nonetheless be able to operate out of ASEAN bases in particular, and then export to America or Mexico as well, into America, into the rest of the world, without looking like they were exporting from China. So that kind of was the world as was. To move to the second part, of course, we now have Donald Trump in power. And that brings up a whole range of new risks and dimensions. And in my mind, it opens up a second chapter in the beginning of this new Cold War. Certainly, I think it looks like the Trump administration, and I'm picking my words carefully here, continues to see China as the core threat to the United States. I'm not going to use tariffs as the example of that. I think that's probably more a Trump thing about tariffs, which I think we all know about, goes back a long, long way before there was any talk of a new Cold War between the United States and China. But if you look at the way that Taiwan has been redefined, or at least the removal of references about US not supporting Taiwan independence, been taken off the State Department kind of list. You look at the sale of F-16s to the Philippines, 20 of those. You look at 70 new Chinese companies put on the entity list by the new Trump administration. Even NVIDIA's H20 chips 200 ships are now prevented from being exported to help China with its continued AI capability. So in some senses, we have continuity. But in one very important respect, we have a fundamental difference, which is that Donald Trump, of course, does not believe in alliances. And that was the very definition of how Biden was managing the Cold War and the Biden administration in the first chapter. In fact, I would say he has a very different viewpoint. Allies are the ones to be taken advantage of. If you have power, why would you be nice to other people a priori in return for nothing? This goes against the Trumpian mentality, as I would see it. And in fact, it's better off to try to abuse allies because they need you, especially if you're the world's largest consumer market and the provider of your allies' security, whereas you need to negotiate with rivals because they don't need maybe as much from you, or you try to create leverage in order to be able to acquire it. So what we have in a way is a whole bunch of risks emerging as a result of this idea that Trump has that in a way you want to negotiate more with your rivals than with your allies. First problem, of course, is he believes, as far as we can tell, in spheres of influence. Now, as a European, we're living that fear today, and it's leading to all sorts of reactions by European governments. But obviously, if you're sitting in Taiwan or Japan or South Korea, it really raises that risk that emerges from not just a rising China militarily, but a rising China with its ally in, or certainly its aligned country in Russia. The whole idea that even if Trump isn't that engaged in thinking about China as a military threat, maybe he will be laid back as China continues to accelerate the gray zone operations that have been taking place around Taiwan, in particular, literally raising in temperature over the last 2 years, as I said, in particular, with military exercises taking place all around the island. We have similar increase in naval activity around the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, challenge between Japan and China. And South Korea itself is finding similar challenges to contested islands with Beijing. So we've seen Beijing pick up the temperature since Trump has come back, not through any overt mechanisms, but through these kind of gray zone type operations that they described. We have, obviously, more broadly from an Asia-Pacific perspective, a fear that Trump is bringing in a me-first economics that can be deeply, deeply damaging to economies across this part of the world that have relied for so long on access to global markets, but in particular to the US market to be able to drive their growth. And that's without even mentioning the worries about having America pulling out of things like climate change negotiations or global health coordination, which matter so much to this region. So it is a very, very challenging moment. We've got the continuity of a Cold War, which, as I said, I believe is deeply rooted. It looked like we had a sort of structure to be able to deal with it emerging at the end of the Biden administration. We now have Trump coming in. The Cold War continues, but the sort of informal emergence of rules, alliances, borders seems to have been thrown up completely in the air. So to finish up, what do we do? And what do Asia-Pacific countries do at this moment? Let me make 3 broad buckets of recommendations. There isn't time for Q&A today, but I think all the panels that will follow will pick up these points and dig into them or bring up their own or challenge the points I'm going to make right now. But let me lay out 3 buckets. First of all, bilateral treaty arrangements with America remain vital for its Asia-Pacific allies, but obviously they can no longer be relied on in the medium term, or certainly not in the short term. So I mean, pick my words carefully. They cannot be relied upon in the short term, certainly as long as Donald Trump is there. So you have to become more resilient individually. I'm not telling you anything original here. Look at what Europe is doing. Asia-Pacific is starting to do as well, spending more on defense. Taiwan talking about 3% of GDP, Japan going to 2%. It doesn't mean having to buy all the biggest or most expensive kit. Look at what Ukraine is being able to do, driving the Russian Navy out of the Black Sea. Well, not out of the Black Sea, but certainly out of Crimea and down towards Novorossiysk. There are really inventive things that inventive countries can do. Hybrid resilience, the resilience against the gray zone warfare. Again, Taiwan, I think, very skilled at this already. Other countries, perhaps around the Asia Pacific, South Korea, Japan, catching up with hybrid warfare, especially disinformation, cyber warfare, etc. Energy resilience is going to be absolutely essential. Again, as we've learnt in Europe, depending on your rivals or even depending on allies that you can't trust, is something you have to be trying to avoid. And again, I think Ukraine is showing interesting examples here. Distributed energy, it's not just about diversification, it's about a more resilient type of energy system as well. And of course, economic resilience, reducing over-dependencies, not just on export markets such as the US, or import points from China. We all need to engage in that activity. Second of my three big buckets, becoming more resilient collectively. Now, I appreciate this is much more challenging in the Asia Pacific than it is in Europe. We are contiguous geographically. NATO, the EU was created under the umbrella as a collective form of economic and security organization, EU, NATO, with American protection. We've built up that muscle memory, those infrastructures, integrated military commands that you don't have here. But I think there are opportunities nonetheless to lean in economically to ASEAN, to other forms of regional economic integration, look for deepening, opening up those markets more amongst yourselves, not reliant on America. By all means, bring in the EU, countries that also rely on deeper trade integration, unlike America. If you can get an EU CPTPP deal, that would be fantastic. And of course, Indonesia, which is going to struggle to become members of these organizations, a member of these organizations can nonetheless use its private sector to use them as avenues for investment. And India, I think, obviously is a huge opportunity there as well. From a security standpoint, again, it's a matter of retaining relationships collectively with your European allies. And I think we were discussing earlier lunch today, the GCAP program between Japan, UK, and Italy for a new next fighter generation aircraft is a good example. AUKUS's Pillar 2, the Australia, UK, US technology agreement has great opportunities there as well. I know the US administration is saying we don't need Europeans in Indo-Pacific security. They'll probably say we don't need Asia-Pacific people in European security. I'd say ignore that advice. They would say that, wouldn't they? Because if playing allies off each other is partly the Trump game, we shouldn't play it, while still being nice to the Trump administration and not saying that to its face. I said it, but there we go. I'm not in government, so I can say it. And I think for Taiwan in particular, if I can make this one point before concluding, I understand that historically, I'm no expert on Taiwan, there's been this focus on sort of some of the global South relationships that involve recognition of Taiwan. But really, it strikes me that Taiwan's future lies with the other liberal democracies that rely on America for their security, as does Taiwan. And therefore, looking for deeper economic relationships, business relationships with the G7 plus countries, EU, UK, Canada, Japan, Australia, would be absolutely vital for Taiwan's future. And my last point, time's up. So I'm on time, hopefully. My last point is that I think we have to be very thoughtful about how we reset relationship with the United States. It is easy to get wrapped up right now in the crisis mode that Donald Trump almost naturally creates to give himself and his administration leverage. But my judgment call, based on having lived and worked in America 15 years, watched it for another 15 from London and from Chatham House, is that I think the US will return to relying on allies. There's no way that the United States will be able to deal with a combined Russia-China, and I don't believe that relationship is going to be broken by anyone in the near term, especially a Russia-China that has got close relationships with Iran and with North Korea, and potentially with other autocratic regimes around the world. There's no way that it can take on that challenge and be economically successful without having allies at its side. So the challenge for us is how can we make sure that we are better allies for an America that is probably going to wake up to its need for alliances again in 4 maybe at a stretch 8 years' time. We're probably going to need 8 years to become good allies. If we can do it in 4, all the better. But I think that's the challenge that lies ahead, not just for European countries where I've come from to this conference, but for those countries that are America's allies in the Asia-Pacific as well. So I'll stop there, look forward to the rest of the conference, and hopefully have a chance to compare notes with some of you over coffee later on. Thank you for the opportunity, Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Robin Niblett, for this brief yet very comprehensive sketch of the geopolitical landscape now we face. And more valuably, we have very concrete advices from Sir Robin Niblett. Now, I would like to introduce our first panel discussion. The topic is Public Problems, Private Solutions, How Asia's Private Sector Can Respond to Uncertainty. Now, Ms. Bao, I would like to give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to moderate this first panel. As it was announced, our panel discussion is really focused on public problems, private solution, how Asia's private sector can respond to uncertainty that we're facing. And I'm really pleased to have 3 leading business figures in Asia joining me on the stage today. Daniel Tsai, who is chairman of Fubon Group, Lim Boon Hang, chairman of Temasek Holdings, and Tak Ninami, chairman and CEO of Suntory Holdings. So these are business leaders from Taiwan, Singapore, and Japan. And just as an introduction, I'm the executive director of the Asia Business Council. So these 3 are my bosses. They are members of my organization and chairman emeriti, and also International Advisory Council members of CAPRI. So congratulations, Shirley, for bringing this wonderful group together. So I think as we just heard from Sir Robin, we're really living through a moment of global transition. And Sir Robin calls it the second chapter of the new Cold War. And this is a very trying time for the world. And some of the old uncertainties, I think that businesses were operating including some of the open markets and stable geopolitics, this is giving way to something that is more contested and more fragmented, perhaps. So in the Asia-Pacific region, many of the economies, including the ones that we are representing here, they're rethinking how they're positioning themselves, not just in light of the global dynamics, but also thinking about domestically how they are boosting their resilience, competitiveness, and also long-term sustainability. So I think what's connecting all of this is really a shared recognition that what we're talking about, economic resilience and sustainability, I think a lot of conferences talk about these things very separately as separate issues, and there's a lot of depth and insight there. But I think what we're facing right now, all these geopolitical uncertainties and shocks, domestic challenges, and also accelerating climate change and risks, they are not really isolated challenges, but they are really connected and they need to be part of the same conversation. So today, I am very pleased that we'll hear 3 perspectives from our business leaders that move across the different layers of this collective challenge. So first, I will invite each speaker to start by giving some initial remarks reflecting on these topics. So first, their view of the global environment and the evolving challenges, and then maybe comment a little bit on their own economies, and last but not least, how their companies and private sector in Asia in general are thinking about challenges that have to do with economic resilience and sustainability. And then in our follow-up conversation, I would like to explore more deeply the minds of these leaders, how they're leading, and how Asia and its private sector leaders really can play an active role and an even more active role, not just in adapting to global challenges, but to shape what is coming next. So with that, I would like to start with you, Daniel, to share with us some of your views.
The Chinese saying is 笨鸟先飞. I'm playing the stupid bird this afternoon, first to fly. In this uncertain time, I think we are reminded again by an old Chinese saying, 自求多福. So I told Shirley about this phrase, and he said, how to say it in English. Luckily, we have ChatGPT. So the answer I was given is to find solution from yourself. it is said that God helps those who help themselves. In the mindset of the private sector, business sectors in Asia, I think traditionally whenever we face challenges, we look to the government for guidance, advice, help, or sometimes even solution. But is this still hold true? I think this topic we are going to be talking about gives just the opposite side of view to the private sector when facing combined or shared challenges. I think this old wisdom really is very helpful. I want to start by talking about Taiwan's technology sector. Many people know that in this AI age, I want to start with talking about Taiwan's position in the AI supply chain, because AI supposedly is everywhere, but I don't think that we find AI everywhere in applications yet. But obviously, AI is talked about everywhere. So let me start by sharing some of my observation of the Taiwanese AI industry or the ICT industry as a whole with you, to start with what I think the success of the Taiwanese technology sector has become. We know that Taiwan is at the center of AI supply chain. This is not something I made up. This was said by Jensen Huang of NVIDIA. He's now sort of God in AI, at least in the infrastructure sphere, area. So I think it's very right for him to put Taiwan in that position, because we not only have TSMC, everybody knows, which makes AI chips, most advanced chips, but from chips to server racks, to power supplies, to cooling systems, to high-speed transmitting, you find Taiwanese manufacturers in every part of it. And all these Taiwanese manufacturers are playing a very important role. People mostly talk about TSMC. Of course, TSMC's success, you can say that was initiated by the Taiwanese government's industrial policy some 50 years ago. So the government set up this institute for technology research institute, which incubated TSMC. They smell that AI is coming. So because they had experience and they had the agility and already the manufacturing capability to accommodate themselves to this rising of AI. So I think for industrial policy, I remember in the old days in Japan, I think Tak would agree with me, MITI was used to be called Almighty, because every industrial policy in Japan was set by MITI as well. So it was a government-led economic development, probably in less mature economy. But take Taiwan, Japan, for example, and other more mature economies in Asia, I don't think that the government has any clue where the industry should be going. And because, as I was saying jokingly this morning, that the reason why the private sector can survive is because we want to make money, and we find way to make money. even in difficult times. So we find solutions and we find directions on our own. This will be the first point I will make this afternoon. The second point is we talk about security. I think increased military spending is inevitable. And it's going to put a strain on the national budget. And so I think for the public sector to try to draw on the experience, the energy, the capital, and the innovativeness of the private sector to create more PPP, private, public-private partnership in picking up the slacks if quality public services will be definitely we have a budget crisis for them to meet. And I think especially in maintaining public safety net, private sector across Asia should try to step up more, to take on more responsibility in helping the public sector to maintain a good safety net. If I go on, I think I'm going to overshoot my time, so I better return to my draft. We talk about Trump's disruption. Lately, the tariff war had created huge turbulence in the FX market. And I think Sir Robin was very right in advising us to try to diversify ourselves away from just one market, especially if diversifying also meaning diversifying our revenue in different currencies. Taiwan, we all know, is a very export-dependent economy. So in this very turbulent time of FX market, the private sector, we have constraints in hedging the FX risk. For example, the so-called non-delivery forward market is non-existent in Taiwan because the central bank simply forbids the transacting of NDF here in the domestic market. So you have to go overseas to look for hedging. And it goes to show that if hedging, which is supposed to be provided by the public sector, is not reliable, what can you do? But to, like I said earlier, to try to diversify your income stream in different currencies from different markets, so to create a natural hedge. And of course, we cannot avoid but to talk about sustainability. And we all know that sustainability, decarbonization is facing tremendous headwind, and we probably all know what it means. But I've always thought that the Earth, there's only one Earth, and it's ours. If we don't save it, who else is going to save it? If the public sector cannot, take the leading role, why not us private sector business leaders trying to make ESG or sustainability as the DNA of your business? I want to share a little bit of what we, as Fubang, as a group, do here in Taiwan. First, we set up a green energy fund because we are a financial institution. We all know that what we can contribute the least is capital. So this fund, what we do is we provide exit to the green energy developers in Taiwan. so that they can recycle their investment and try to build and develop more green energy resources. And not only that, we talk about, I think Sir Robin also suggested very wisely that we should try to react to the present challenges collectively. So we have been trying to also participate, more in the collaboration of our fight in this climate change, against climate change. So in 2023, we were invited to the ESG seminar at the APEC Finance Ministers meeting. And in 2024, we represented Taiwan's financial sector in the WTO Public Forum. What we did there was we shared insights on green financing and decarbonization, which were the lessons we learned from our NT 2.57 trillion in pre-financing up to 2023. And Taiwan Mobile has been an active member of GSID, which is an organization which promotes digital enabling sustainability. So we're going to co-host a global AI-enabled sustainability summit. And also as Taiwan's APEC representative, we have been advancing cross-border collaboration in digital transformation and AI application. I want to close by saying that many people are predicting that this coming age, will be Asia, the age of Asia. And especially deglobalization and regionalization has made us even more important than ever. So again, taking on Sir Robin's advice, to try to face up to all these challenges collectively as a private sector, as the private sector is probably the only solution going forward. Especially, I think the collaboration is not going to just be in the sense of promoting or enhancing prosperity in Asia. I hope that we can help also the global South when the help coming from the West or from America is going to be decreasing. How can we also help the global South as we, become more prosperous? So this, I think, is the direction that the Asia private sector can go, and we can all collectively play a more active role. That ends my note.
Thank you, Daniel, for your initial remarks. I think what really struck me about your remarks is the examples you gave, from technology, AI to sustainability. Some of the things that I think the world and different countries have assumed are public goods or issues of global commons. These are increasingly in the line of sight of private sector, and that you're saying that private sector needs to play a bigger role in it. And I think that this really coincides with a time when there is an erosion of public trust in institutions, from government to scientific institutions, even to universities. And it's very interesting to explore the role of private sector in fostering more collaboration and solving some of these really grave challenges. Boon Heng, I want to come to you. I mean, Singapore is a country that has been thinking about many of these complex challenges for many decades, and Temasek certainly has been at the forefront of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your thinking in terms of the company's role in fostering resilience of the country, and specifically what you as a leader of Temasek has been thinking?
Thank you, Janet. Well, as Sir Robin Niblett has mentioned, the world has changed. And globalization as we knew it, I think is a thing of the past. But I want to draw out one point which I think is missing from Sir Robin's analysis, because he focused on the geopolitics. But the world has shifted because free trade no longer provides large numbers of people good jobs to earn a good living. And this is especially so in developed economies. And therefore, that causes social tensions and social strife. And politicians respond to that. Whether rightly or wrongly, it's a matter of debate, but it's also one of the reasons why we have this troubled world. The next point I want to bring up is that whilst countries are responding to building resilience, it is also because of our experience with COVID-19. COVID-19 underscored the need for resilience and highlighting the dangers of relying on a single provider for critical goods. So economists now realize the importance of self-reliance or diversifying supply sources. Now, I take my own country, Singapore. We have no natural resources, and we must ensure our supplies of water, energy, and food. We'll be self-reliant on water if our energy supply is resilient through using recycled water or desalination. Energy-wise, we cannot be self-reliant unless we consider innovative solutions like nuclear reactors, be it fission or fusion. Fusion energy will not be commercially viable for years to come. But can Singaporeans accept fission in small modular reactors? Is still a big question mark. So for the time being, we have no choice but to diversify our sources of supply of energy. So we will try to import green energy from our neighbors. For food, Singapore is so small, we have to diversify our sources because of the small size of Singapore. And with that, bear likely the higher costs of supply. Now, these three critical resources, the supply of which will matter to all countries, big or small. Another issue which Sir Robin mentioned is about intellectual property as a critical resource. So economies compete to own by creating leading-edge intellectual property for technical and commercial advantage. But as we know, some economies try to maintain their edge by restricting others' access to such intellectual property. With respect to intellectual property, quality human resources is critical. So the smart economies take a long-term view and invest in education, developing good schools and universities, and also investing in continuing education and training. And everywhere, investors look for economies that invest in their people. And our economies will build resilience through either self-reliance or diversification, or diversification. So long as the world leaders do not, cannot, or will not come together to discuss these common concerns and build a new world order, frictions will rise in intensity as each economy acts only in its own self-interest. Now, when each economy looks after its own self-interest only, then large countries have an advantage because they have a bigger market. And small countries like Singapore are at a grave disadvantage because of small market size. So this is a backdrop to this more turbulent, chaotic, and unpredictable world. But as Daniel says, in business, we take the world for what it is. So how should businesses operate? Well, first, we examine our purpose. Purpose is our North Star that guides us no matter what the state of the world is. Now, for the enterprise that I chair, our purpose is so every generation prospers. Now, it's not just for every generation of Singaporeans because we are a Singaporean company, but it's for every generation in all the geographies where we operate, because we are a global investor. Now, I know that some multinational companies with long histories and years of experience operating in different geographies also operate to a similar kind of philosophy or similar purpose. Now, in an interaction with a business leader recently, I asked him how his company was doing business in a certain country. His reply showed a deep understanding of the world. He said, "We have to solve their problems." Short statement with deep meaning. We have to solve their problems. So in this world, there are companies that have long adopted the philosophy of producing goods in the economies where they operate. Or if that's not possible, within the region so that the supply chains are short. In so doing, they look after the livelihoods of the people in those geographies which they operate. I think this is a very sound and sensible principle. So all businesses, especially when they do cross-border business, must also think of the livelihoods of the people where they operate. At the same time, we believe that every business should earn their social license to operate. So therefore, businesses that operate in a country must contribute to the social health of that country. And many do, embracing corporate social responsibility, or CSR. And some go beyond helping the poor to uplifting them through education and training. And in Asia, over the centuries, we all know that businesses have helped build schools, hospitals, and bridges when the governments could not. Now, India has a very innovative measure, and that is by law, all businesses today are required to put aside 2% of their profits for community support. Now, we, in our company, put aside on a voluntary basis a part of our returns above our cost of capital. So we protect the value of our business by earning our cost of capital. When we do better and beyond that, we put aside a portion of it for community support in a community fund. And we must remember that we are all stewards. And as stewards, we strive to leave this world a better place than when we find it. And it's in our own self-interest to be good stewards of the global commons. And this includes helping to protect the environment that we live in. This one world that we all share, as Daniel put it. Combating climate change is our collective responsibility. There's no business to be done in a dead planet. And we know that if the world does not succeed in combating climate change, by the year 2050, the world would lose 35% of GDP. And so for us doing business, if you're going to have a reduced GDP, it's less business to be done. So therefore, it's our interest, it's now in our interest to make sure that this is a better world. And there are opportunities for earning a good return by investing in climate solutions. And within Asia alone, over the next 5 years, there are at least 120 billion US dollars of business to be done in this field. So as a company, we targeted to achieve net zero, which we have done. And we have also set ourselves a target of reducing the carbon emissions of our portfolio to half from our 2010 baseline by the year 2030, and to net zero by the year 2050. And we work with our portfolio companies to work out their plans of how to achieve this in the years ahead. And we have been investing in sustainability. We have Singapore dollars, $38 billion in companies that are in sustainability or sustainably focused investments. And we put aside $6 billion in a subsidiary called Gen Zero to help drive new innovative solutions for climate change. And then we have an internal carbon price. So for every new investment that we make, it must also clear our internal carbon price, which currently is US $65 per ton and going up to 100 in the year 2030. And then we share knowledge about sustainability through our Eco-Prosperity Conference. This year's edition was held just last week, attended by over 4,000 people from around the world. It's a platform for people to share their ideas and their solutions to combat climate change. So in summary, we stay aware of world events, adapt to the changing world, act decisively according to our purpose, contribute to the well-being of our communities, and strive to be responsible stewards of the global commons. I think if more join us, we believe we all can build a better world.
Thank you very much, Boon Hang. I could not have summarized it better. Working with purpose as business, not just for the license to operate, but also for the prosperity of people's livelihood and also the planet. I think what you said just really underscores the importance of Asian economies stepping up, even at a time of global fragmentation, to think about what the region can do to collaborate with one another and the central role that businesses play. Tak, I want to go to you now. Japan. Japan is a country that has been a staunch ally of the US and other developed economies, liberal democracies. How do you think of the current the global landscape that we're in, and how does that affect Japan's role and the business operating environment? And how do you think your company and as a business leader that you can foster greater resilience and sustainability?
Thank you, Janet. You're right. We thought that Japan is the best ally of the United States. On the contrary, we've got a huge wake-up call. As a matter of fact, we got the two wake-up calls. In the middle of the tipping time for Japan, we just woke up from a 30-year sleep, and which means the deflation. Don't forget that deflation is such a monster. That reduces a hugely animal spirit. And having said that, the corporates of Japan accumulated as much as $2.5 trillion as excess cash. And by the way, the first wake-up call is the Trump announced that Japan is one of the countries to be targeted to reduce the deficit. Over years, I would say, since Trump retired from the first term, we increased the investment to the United States, and we've been the biggest foreign investor for 5 years. Ended up generating as many as more than 1 million jobs. Though President said Japan should reduce the trade deficits, and because of the current tariffs on the goods exported to the United States, our GDP would be hurt by more than 1%. And definitely we have to avoid that kind of enormous negative impact, because we are now moving toward the better economy. So we have to avoid it, and we'll have the upper house election in July too. Second impact was which happened in Europe and the NATO, that was a huge wake up. Knowing that we don't have any peace dividend, which we enjoyed from the United States mostly. So the first one, going back to the first tariff impact, if this continues, the US will definitely go into recession. Not only because of Japan, mostly the relations between US and China. 10% over the Chinese products to United States, that will increase the 0.7% inflation. And the MIT report said, and Secretary Bessent talked about it. And definitely, US is now in the trajectory to the recession. Who wants to invest it to the country which is toward the recession? Nobody, right? Japan has to think about where to invest then. Japanese corporates have the thousands of billions of dollars. Where to go? Now in the United States, right? Then where to go? Perhaps India, perhaps Global South. We have to re-strategize what to do in terms of investment. Because the country where is going toward the recession, we never invest, right? So that kind of warning should be given to the United States. I did through the CNN and Bloomberg, because we like to invest in the United States, because US is still the country with innovation. But if this goes on, there's no way for us to diversify our investment furthermore. Second, wake-up call from NATO, Europe. We have to defend ourselves. It's for sure. We have to work with the Australia, South Korea, perhaps Taiwan, to upgrade the deterrence capabilities. So we will. But how? How to do it? But think about the current North Korea. Nobody's stopping. North Korea is now developing nukes, I'm sure, and getting technology from Russia to develop the ICBM. If this continues, definitely that will impact to the South Korea. If that happens, Japan will get the impact. Already 20% of the general public of Japan supports to own nukes. We have to, stop this kind of trend. We will celebrate the 80th anniversary of the nuclear bombs to Hiroshima and Nagasaki this year. At this year, we are talking about nukes in this region. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. We have to talk, working together, how to stop this trend in this region. Because we've been using our wisdom not to make use of the nuclear weapons for many years. But we are thinking about the nukes. And Japan has to think every option because of the current rogues, which are very active to think about the nuclear options, right? So we are now very negative tipping point as well. We have to work together. What is the resilience? That is we have to depend on our wisdom, our integrity. And together with the AI, if we make use of AI for multi-use, that is more dangerous than maybe nuclear weapons. So Japan is a tipping point, good or bad. Anyway, we have to handle together with the like-minded countries like here. So that's what we have to do. And let me talk about a little bit the Suntory. We are a beverage company, and number 3 in the spirits, number 5 soft drink. Supply chain is so important. And three things. One, we are changing the business portfolio, focusing on higher gross margin and differentiated from other products. So definitely more, inclined to the profitable profits, so that we can be more resilient than other companies. And the second thing is we are upgrading the intelligence activities. We hired lots of famous scholars and think tankers, so that we can be resilient and we can raise our capabilities in foreseeing what's going to be happening. But we have to assume more costs because we have the plan A, plan B, plan C, multi-scenario planning. That is so important, which didn't happen before. So that means we have to be resilient by changing our portfolio of business to be more profitable, much stronger than our competitors. Lastly, the key thing is how can we be trusted by society? That is the most important factor to be resilient. We business is not trusted. Government is not trusted. So the business is now to be trusted by society by giving back to society much more than before. Society is a last resort for us to be able to rely on for us to survive. So now is the time business leaders in Japan are working together to work with the civil society to support the children in poverty and so forth, so that we are trusted by society. That's what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tak, for sharing with us your views on Japan and also just rounding up by talking about the importance of rebuilding trust as businesses and how really the future of private sector is really intertwined with society, with your consumers, with suppliers, with people you work with. I know we're almost running out of time, but I do want to spend maybe 1 minute each for each of you. Share a bit about, what as a leader in Asian business, do you think gives you hope for the future? And how do you push forward in this really trying time? So I know could be the next hour, but perhaps give you the challenge of 1 minute each, and then we can round up the session. Maybe, Tak, you can talk about, maybe elaborate on your trust.
I'm optimistic
trust point.
because I've been talking as the leader of the Business Association of Japan to represent Japan's business. I'm asking all business leaders of big corporations, donate your money to civil society. Because we can't rely on the government. Government is not effective. They never think about what they spent. They don't care about the efficacy, but business cares. So asking at least 1% of their net earnings to work with the civil society to tackle social issues. The society is resilient. Our business is resilient. Trust is everything from society. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tak. Boonheng?
When you live as old as I have, you go through ups and downs of life, and you know that there are always going to be crises. But human nature is such that in every crisis, we will find solutions and we will rise and overcome it. So today, while Trump, tariffs, all that may be on everybody's mind, if it doesn't go the way of developing the US economy, surely somebody will get him to change if he doesn't change himself. And surely the United States are not going to go down that path blindly. And so we must be optimistic that something positive will happen, right? And if you want to do business, you must always be an optimist.
Thank you, Boon Hang. Last but not least, Daniel.
We all know the problem of democracy is the constant change of government. That's why, of course, government is never never to be depended upon. As a private business leader, I firmly believe that fate is in our own hands, and we, collectively, the private sector can find a wisdom to, withstand not just the present Trumpian headwind, but also overcoming future challenges. So we have faith. I think we cannot go on if we lose that faith. Thank you.
On that hopeful note, will you join me in thanking these wonderful business leaders and sharing their perspectives? Thank you very much.
Thank you again to our moderator and our three panelists, and thank you again for ending this discussion on a can-do spirit note. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to ask you again to put your hands together for our three panelists as they make their way back to their seats, and to our moderator for that very insightful and engaging conversation from the private sector's perspective. And now we are going to move on to the second panel discussion. Today, to again echo Mr. Ni Nami's notes on how trust is very important. Trust is also the founding stone of partnerships. So the next session, we have a topic. It's Partnerships for the Pacific, Navigating Climate and Health Across the Blue Continent. And to begin, I'm pleased to welcome our moderator to the stage, Ms. Sylvia Shi, Managing Editor of Commonwealth Magazine. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for this session as Ms. Shi is making her approach to the stage. I would also like to welcome her fellow panelists to this session to join the moderator. So Sir Colin Tukuitonga, Senior Fellow at CAPRI and Co-Director of the Center for Pacific and Global Health of University of Auckland. Welcome. Also, Ms. Ronnie Ng-Shu, Co-Director of the Center for Pacific and Global Health of University of Auckland. Welcome. And also Ms. Emi Shutaro, Executive Director of the Pacific Islands Health Officers Association. So I see that our moderator and our panelists are comfortably settled in. And this panel will start in a different fashion. We are going to have an introduction by Dr. Lin Jingyi. Dr. Lin Jingyi is the Deputy Minister of Health and Welfare of Republic of China, Taiwan. And she is also the former coordinator of the Taiwan Medical Mission in Tuvalu. And now, please put your hands together and join me in welcoming Deputy Minister Lin to the stage. A round of applause, please. Thank you, Dr. Lin. And we look forward to a thought-provoking session with your introduction. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shirley, our panelists, and our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I'm Lin Jingyi, Deputy Minister of Health and Welfare. I also was legislator, member of Social Welfare and Environment Hygiene Committee, and member of Foreign and National Defense Committee. I am the first legislator hosted Sustainable Development Goal Committee and Civil Defense Committee in Parliament. And just mentioned earlier, I was the mobile medical team missions in Tuvalu in South Pacific. It's my honor attending this forum to share my experience and perceptions in South Pacific Public Health Cooperation. And our program is supported by Ministry of Health and Welfare. And I would like to extend my observation about the importance of international cooperation, national security, and Austronesian Language Families Alliance for Taiwan. Is not only for networking, but more important, it is identity of our country. I was gynecology and obstetric doctor before my political career. It's so privileged for me to join the mobile medical team experience in Tuvalu since 2008 to 2013. Yes, I really thanks for the important opportunity for me to join those missions. I always remember I am and my colleagues, my hospital colleagues, first time to know where is our South Pacific diplomatic countries. And the first time to know, Tuvalu is so far from Taiwan. We need to fly there 2 days, 4 trips. The first time we know, and the first time we have the culture shock, not only medical equipment, lifestyle, and environment. So actually, I could talk about all those experiences for hours. But the very important in past decades, Taiwan is lack of the opportunity of international participation, absent from international organizations, absent from international meetings, absent from formal community and the negotiation channel. So actually for our young generations, they really lack of the global cooperation opportunity, lack of the information, especially from UN, from WHO, from the global societies, and the very important programs, cooperations, opportunities, actually is really unfair to our young populations and unfair to all the Taiwanese people. So maybe this recent we talk about the tariff challenge. Actually, maybe that is another kind of chance for Taiwan, just like the COVID pandemic. We are clearly having the same position and even new opportunity for cooperation, negotiate, and bargain. The medical mission with our diplomatic countries since 2006. The public and the private hospital cooperated with ICDF, provide medical training, medical services, medical equipment, drugs donation for our diplomatic countries. And the programs shift to Ministry of Health and Welfare since 2015. So we have Taiwan public centers, public health centers, Taiwan medical programs, Taiwan medical teams in our Pacific countries to help our friends in children nutrition programs, diabetes control, dental health, chronic disease control, and digital medical management, and the laboratory quality improving programs. And very important, we also provide medical doctors and nurses training programs for our diplomatic countries in Pacific. So during pandemic, overseas hospital also provided digital medical services for helping our friends in disease control, chronic disease consultation, and the vaccination knowledge training. I really hope I could let you know how deep relationships and the friendships between those countries, people, and our medical workers in those very important cooperation programs. But in another side is very important is Taiwanese actually we real to realize we are also Austronesian language families. We are sisters and brothers with the Alliance of Pacific countries. So when I first realized that the very important history and the culture and originals, actually I recognized that what is real Taiwan's identity. So when we think about that, to understand that, we were to rethink about the position of Taiwan, not only geographically, but also history, original, culture, and the relations with our South Pacific friends. The more connected with our Pacific friends, the more we realize the real Taiwan's role in the region and in the global. So I always believe Taiwan could be and should be the partner of the international society in public health, in regional security, digital technology, and even in blue economics. So very happy once again. Thank you. Today could have the opportunity to join this forum. And I always believe the South Pacific is our very important partners and very important original place to reach out the more cooperation with global society. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Please put your hands together to thank Dr. Lin Jingyi, Deputy Minister Lin, for that very kind introduction, for sharing Taiwan's valuable experiences in fostering climate and health partnerships. And now, Ms. Shi, the stage is fully yours.
Thank you so much. So I am Selfa Shi, Managing Editor with Taiwan's Commonwealth Magazine, and also today's panel host. I'm going to moderate the panel called Partnership for the Pacific. And why this issue matters, someone told me it's also called how to stay together, stronger in this complicated world. So today, our three panelists are gonna walk us through how they adapt and how they thrive. But most importantly, they are a part of a global alliance called Partnership for Health System Sustainability and Resilience. CAPRI is also one of the participating alliance. Last year, CAPRI and three of our panelists actually worked a report that explored the potential risks and also opportunities in the Pacific region. So before we dig into the research, maybe I should introduce our panelists first, from my left to right. The first one is Sir Colin Tonga. And the second one is Roani Ningxiu. And the third is Amy Chutaru. So let's start with our discussion with Sir Colin first. Can you walk us through briefly about the highlight of the research I just mentioned, and what have you found that you think you have to share with our audience today?
Oh, thank you very much. As has been mentioned, the three of us and others were part of the report, the PSS report on 3 islands from the Pacific, the Kingdom of Tonga, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Vanuatu. Just briefly, the Pacific islands, of course, face a number of challenges. The most important is the tyranny of distance. Small populations scattered across the largest body of water on the planet. Very small health systems, largely dependent on government contributions, inherited over the years based on an infectious disease predominance. The problem in the islands at the moment, of course, is 80% of the deaths are due to chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease. So in a way, the existing health systems are no longer fit for purpose. People with chronic diseases live a very long time with 1 or 2 chronic conditions. They don't need to go to expensive healthcare facilities. Climate change has been referred to this afternoon, and it is one of the serious aggravating factors to healthcare delivery in the small islands of the Pacific. Climate crisis makes more difficult what already exists. Let me give you an example. It's pretty difficult to get clean water in small island states, atolls, even at the best of times. And when you have climate change, climate crisis with rising sea levels, saltwater inundation, getting access to clean water, it becomes even more difficult. I should also say that the climate crisis is an issue of fairness and social justice for people of the Pacific. They contribute less than 0.03% of the harmful greenhouse gases, and they're the people who are living the dramatic effects of climate change. My colleague will talk some more about that. But in terms of the report, I just want to highlight three key things. One is financing of small health systems is largely reliant on taxpayers, public funding. And many small islands struggle to balance the need to fund education, police force, and so on. And so many of the small islands spend less than 5% of GDP on health. There's no magical figure as to what you should spend. But generally speaking, if you spend less than 5% of GDP on health, it's very difficult to provide basic care. The fact that immunization rates in the small island states is very good is really a testament to the commitment of healthcare workers. So financing healthcare services is a major problem across many of the island states. And when people go to tell them, well, you should fund more of this and more of that, it's a pointless exercise because the poor old Minister of Health, where's he going to get the money from? It's not possible to generate more money from local sources because if you say, Minister of Health, please, sir, Minister of Finance, may we have more money to do this? You really should say to them, and you could do less of that. That's the conversation. No point writing a long shopping list of things to do when there is no money in the kitty. Financing of healthcare services in the region is a major problem. Huge reliance on out-of-pocket expenses. And what that means, of course, is the people without the money, and often the people who need healthcare the most don't have the money. So there's a real challenge to an alternative arrangement, some options for financing healthcare better in the region. The second big issue I want to highlight is the chronic loss of trained healthcare workers. The New Zealand health system and the Australian health system wouldn't work without trained healthcare workers from the region, particularly nurses. I know the healthcare workforce is a global phenomenon, but the Pacific Island nations have suffered chronic loss of trained healthcare people. And there's been codes of conduct and good practice in the recruitment of people globally. It's just a paper exercise in my view. People are pressured to do the best they can for themselves. And I do think this is where the conversation needs to be had about bigger nations, wealthier nations doing the right thing. Stop poaching, stop taking from very small workforces in the islands and do the right thing. Look, I could go on, but I should stop here. Thinking about opportunities, there is a problem of reliable, consistent supply of proven medication in the islands. And if Taiwan business, others are thinking about opportunities, supplying affordable, proven, cost-effective medication for common conditions like diabetes and heart disease is one opportunity. The second, of course, we hear a lot about Taiwanese technology. I've heard a lot over the years about what telehealth and telemedicine can offer, but it's still largely science fiction. I read something the other day about the AI doctor will see you now. It sounds good in the newspapers, but is it really an option? So the minister was very kind, and I thought she was quite correct in perhaps Taiwan and other countries considering additional support, medical care, nursing, trained people, as well as exploring, of course, technological options. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Colin. I'm sorry, we have only 20 minutes for the panel, but I believe we're going to have longer one next year. So, Ronnie, so since Sir Colin touched a little bit on that issue, maybe you can talk more on how do you see the climate change affect the healthcare system and also economic resilience in the region, and what opportunity you've seen that you can share with our audience today?
Thanks for the question, and I think in terms of the impacts of climate on health and economic resilience in the Pacific, Sir Colin is correct in that we face the biggest impact from climate change. What that actually means, though, too, is that we have more adverse weather effects. This impacts on our infrastructure, and particularly on water and sanitation, as Sir Colin has mentioned. And so by 2030, the Pacific will not be meeting its SDG target, where 1 in 6 people can have access to basic drinking water. And so when you are experiencing frequent weather events that decimate your population, that decimate your infrastructure, that decimate your food and your livelihoods, building back better is really difficult and becomes an ongoing challenge. And it is quite complex. And so thinking through both the health and the economic resilience of Pacific people is quite imperative. On the flip side, though, in terms of opportunities, is the fact that our population is quite a youthful population. So half of the region are under the age of 23 years old, for example. And so what that means, though, is that for the region to be prosperous, we also need a stable environment, we need stable political stability, but we also need economic opportunities. And I think this economic opportunity comes from partners in this room. And, you know, this is my first time in Taipei and Taiwan, and we hear a lot about this rhetoric around islandness. And I think leaning into what Minister of Health had said about our deep historical connection with Taiwan, but also with other islands like Singapore, Philippines, Japan, I think there is really room and scope to provide a balance of power, or at least provide the Pacific with a better shot in terms of thriving. We know that from the IMF, they have said that the Pacific would need at least $1 billion per year in order for us to adapt to the constant change in climate. As Pacific people, we have navigated, you know, the biggest expanse of water in the world, and we did this, you know, with very little advanced technology. But what we can't do right now is actually adapt fast enough to people polluting, emitting greenhouse gases. And so this actually needs global cooperation, collaboration, and actually moral will. You know, people doing the right thing, doing good things for others. And so, you know, we heard a little bit about Trump and thinking about America first, but, you know, is it going to be a great America if there's no one else to enjoy it too? And so I think I'm looking out and I can see some young people from the Pacific region, and they, you know, this is what we're doing it for. We're doing it for our future children. We're doing it for the prosperity not only of the Pacific but also of the globe. And I think global cooperation, alliances, and people just doing the right thing is really important.
Thank you, Ron. Hello. Yes. So thank you so much for touch on the issue about the geopolitics, which is going to be the main theme about this forum. So Amy, you're going to be the next speaker for my following question. the thing is, we've seen the trend that the retreat of the U.S. leadership in not only in global health and also the climate governance. I'm wondering, how does that affect the Pacific nation, and how to give you the longer support of that?
谢谢 Suba. I think I've got one of the more challenging questions, I think. First of all, as an organization based out of Honolulu, Hawaii, we are 98% funded by the US federal government. So in some instances, I'm going to be saying a few things that I know will be a little sensitive for us, obviously, going back home. But, you know, as many of you know, the United States has issued a number of executive orders, you know, within its 100 days of administration. And a number of those executive orders really targeted a number of not only global programs that support healthcare initiatives, health diplomacy across the globe, but also even domestically within the United States. And so we know from the media what's happening with USAID, for example, that have supported a number of initiatives in the Pacific region for health system strengthening, particularly in the natural disaster and climate change arena. And so that pullout is having a domino effect that we're seeing across a number of partners in the Pacific region and Asia Pacific region as well that have been supported by USAID funding. In addition, one of the executive orders was to pull out of the World Health Organization. And, you know, a number of our partnerships, you know, were with the Western Pacific Regional Office here in the region in Manila. And so a number of us have been notified to no longer engage with the World Health Organization. So with a number of our activities and the budgets that we're having to submit, we're having to actually delete WHO out of a number of those budget submissions back to our federal funders. We're also seeing a number of nonprofits, both international as well as domestic nonprofits in the United States that not only work domestically within the United States, but also globally as well, are also being impacted. A number of funding programs that are supporting humanitarian assistance more broadly are also facing a lot of notices for eliminations. And so what we're seeing is a time of chaos, a time also now of survival. And where can we find those other leverages to be able to keep our heads above water? Domestically, I also want to note that a number of the administration's policies have been to what they call reduction in force. So there's a number of federal agencies that are being targeted at the moment for a quite extensive reduction in force. So just recently, within the last few months, you know, nearly 20,000 staff from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention were given termination notices. You know, not only our CDC Global Health colleagues, but also our CDC domestic colleagues as well. We're seeing a number of public health programs that are also being completely eliminated. So a really good example is the Pacific Islands team for chronic diseases within the Center of National Chronic Disease at CDC have all been either terminated or have been shifted and reassigned to other positions. And of course, that's going to have an impact on us in the Pacific region that rely on the Pacific Islands team to be able to coordinate funding and technical assistance to the Northern Pacific in particular. We're also seeing a number of other programs, you know, that are sort of core to, you know, epi-intelligence and to, you know, laboratory services, as well as to lead poisoning, you know, surveillance and prevention activities. I mean, I could go down the list. I mean, there's a very extensive list of a lot of different programs that are currently being impacted quite severely, either in terms of severe reduction in staffing or just wholesale 100% eliminated. And, you know, right now there is a lot of fear with, you know, you open your phone and you just don't know, which colleague, just got their termination notice yesterday. Just this morning, a colleague of mine just indicated that she had gotten her termination notice a few hours ago. So, we do not know what really the future is going to be at the moment, because these reduction in force, this targeting of staffing reductions within the National Institutes of Health, within CDC, within Food and Drug Administration, within the substance abuse and mental health programs, and the list goes on. The question is, what next? And what are we going to be able to see will remain? And from there, where we can then continue to nurture and to leverage and to make sure that those remaining programs and those remaining staff that we can work with in the federal government, can be supported as much as possible to be successful in their work. So I think the big question really is now about the evolution of understanding the chaos, knowing what's going to be available within the next days, weeks, months, years, to then where can then we then rebuild, ensure resilience, and ensure sustainability of public health interventions and healthcare interventions, not only across the Pacific region, but even domestically within the United States. So I think I was very, very heartened by Dinami-san's ending point there, where he said, one of the things that would be really important is, for private sector to be an active contributor to health, to be an active partner in health, because we cannot rely on government. That's clear. But it's not just the current U.S. administration. I'm talking about any government. And I think that private-public partnership, with health, folks have said, climate change is a shared burden. Well, health is a shared burden as well within that. So how can we explore those partnerships? What are the next steps? And at the end of the day, where can we survive and thrive together as nations and as human beings who need to protect and take care of our families, our children, our elders, and our community at large. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So I know our time's up, but before we wrap up this session, could all of you give us one sentence or one takeaway that you wish our audience to remember from our discussion today?
One of the things that we haven't mentioned is the fact that the US is threatening the solidarity of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is a global, collective agreement to do more for climate change. And it's very important that the non-US members of the global community step up and honor the commitment to the Paris Agreement. That would go a long way to relieving or alleviating the plight of Pacific folk suffering from facing the consequences of the climate change, not from their own fault, but in fact the actions of others who should really be doing the right thing.
Paris agreements. What about Ronnie? Do you have one takeaway for our audience?
There's definitely a lot of room and opportunity for innovation and partnerships between all island states to build resilience, or I guess maintain resilience, because we've always been quite resilient people. And I guess the theme is on building resilience on shaky ground, and I would just add, and through choppy waters for the Pacific region. Thank you.
Amy, you are not the last. You are the important ones.
Okay, I'm going to stick my neck out a little bit here. And I want to really highlight one particular thing that maybe for most folks don't really know. When we look at the military, here in the Pacific region, and you look at the participation in those military, one fact that is often really not well understood is the number of Pacific Islanders that are represented in our militaries in the region. So the United States military, Pacific Islanders from the Northern Pacific, are on a per capita basis, are actually the largest ethnic group that actually is in the military. Same also in Australia and New Zealand, you have a very high proportion of Pacific Islanders who are serving in the military. And so when we are talking about strategic defense and we're talking about the potential to really look at resilience and partnerships, and hopefully we will not have any conflicts, but one never knows. But I think what's really important for folks in this room to know is that if there is going to be conflict, that the Pacific Islands are going to be in those military forces. They are going to be laying their lives down, for the health and for the life and security and protection of the Asia-Pacific region. So Pacific Islanders are actively putting their lives on the line to be able to protect not only Oceania, but our region writ large. So I wanted to sort of highlight that because, again, I think we really need to look at sort of the seriousness of some of these issues and that the investment in the Pacific region is not just only an investment in health, it's also an investment in protection. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you all of our panelists for their insights and to you as well for being such an engaged audience. Thank you again. Thanks.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in thanking our moderator and panelists for raising these very important issues. Indeed, we face choppy waters and shaky grounds. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move forward in our program with the topic. The topic comes with the alliteration: Trump, trade, and tariffs, protecting economic resilience in an era of disruption. To moderate this session, I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Enoch Wu, founder of Forward Alliance, to the stage. Please join me to welcome Mr. Enoch Wu. As he walks onto the stage, I would also like to invite the following panelists to join him on the stage. Ms. Kathy Matsui, General Partner at Empower Partners and former policy commentator with Japan's Cabinet Office. Welcome, Ms. Kathy Matsui. Ms. Mara Rotman, practitioner, senior fellow at CAPRI and distinguished professor at the Miller Center of Public Affairs of University of Virginia. Welcome, Ms. Mara Rotman. And also Dr. Alicia Garcia Evero, member of the board at CAPRI, chief economist for Asia Pacific at Natixis and senior fellow at Bruegel. Welcome. And now with our moderator and panelists settled in, now, Ms. Enoch, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Shirley, and to the entire team at CAPRI for your invitation. Every time that I attend a CAPRI event, I am ever the more impressed by the talent that you're able to convene, not just from around the world, but across disciplines. As we look around this auditorium here, I'm sure all of you will agree that the representation here speaks to the impact that CAPRI has been making. In this age of heightened risk and uncertainty, age of growing distrust and polarization, and an age where democracies are at risk of decline, I think we especially need this space for constructive debate, the space for serious discussion, and the space for collective action. And so it is my honor to share the stage with our panelists here today, who bring with them a wealth of experience from government to academia to finance and the private sector, as policymakers, as researchers, as investors, covering Asia, Europe, and America. They represent here the global perspectives and expertise that we all must draw from if we are to have a chance at navigating through the turbulence in which we find ourselves. And so in alphabetical order, if I may, we have with us here today Alicia Garcia Herrero, Kathy Matsui, and Mara Rudman. I'm going to give a brief introduction of their backgrounds. I believe they need no introduction, but please bear with me, and I very much look forward to our engagement and our discussion here today. Alicia is the chief economist for Asia Pacific at Nexus. She also serves as the senior fellow at the European think tank, Bruegel. Did I pronounce that right? And a non-resident senior fellow at the East Asian Institute of National University, Singapore. Alicia is also adjunct professor at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, a member of the Council of Advisors on Economic Affairs to the Spanish government, and an advisor to the Hong Kong Monetary Authority's research arm. She's a board member of CAPRI, as you know, and this is our second time sharing the stage, so it's good to see you, Alicia. Kathy here to my left is a founding general partner of N-Power Partners, Japan's first ESG integrated global venture capital fund. She is the former vice chairman of Goldman Sachs Japan and the chief Japan equity strategist. Her groundbreaking work that many of you have heard of, I'm sure, is on womenomics. Its research has spurred the Japanese government to promote gender equality and diversity, and she has advised corporations on governance and best practices on diversity. She has a master's from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies and is a graduate of Harvard. Mara, finally, last but not least, is a James D. Schlesinger Distinguished Professor at the Miller Center at the University of Virginia, where she runs the Ripples of Hope project. Mara served on the 2022 to 2024 National Defense Strategy Commission, was deputy assistant to the President for National Security Affairs in the Obama and Clinton administrations, deputy envoy for the Office of the Special Envoy for Middle East Peace at the U.S. Department of State, Assistant Administrator for the Middle East at USAID, and Chief Counsel to the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Please, everyone, let's give them a warm welcome. Thank you. I was at the Munich Security Conference this February, and immediately following U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's speech on the floor of the event, I heard two sounds. One figuratively and one literally. First was this collective gasp as the air seemed to be sucked out from the event hall. But the second, the literal sound I heard came from a European gentleman standing next to me who uttered, he said, quote, "We are seeing a change of alliance," end quote. And in the last few months, we have witnessed a series of shocks to global systems, first in security, and then in humanitarian and global health work, as we've just heard from the panel just now, and now in trade and economy, which is what we're here to discuss. And I want to invite each of our panelists here to open with their assessment on the impact of the Trump administration's approach to trade and tariffs from the perspectives of investors, policymakers, and industry. Then we'll drill down on a couple ideas, and time permitting, we'll take some questions from the floor. And finally, I'll ask our panelists to take us home. You can see I'm trying to get through. There is a clock right in front of us with a very clear, and someone doing this to me. So, and I, yesterday when I met our panelists, I said to them, my only mission today, my foremost mission is to get out of the way and let them speak. And here I am still rambling on. So if I may, let's go with this order. Kathy first, then Mara, then Alicia, and then we'll rotate the order going forward. But please, with your opening remarks, help us understand what we're seeing, what's going on. As an investor, as someone from Japan, as a policymaker, as someone who tuned to national security implications, and obviously someone who is tracking industry and supply chain closely. So please, Kathy, thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. And my first thanks to Shirley for inviting me. Shirley and I go way back from our Goldman days, and I remember you talking about CAPRI before this was even anything real. So congratulations and kudos to you and your team for what you've built. It's truly extraordinary. I used to work at Goldman Sachs as a macro analyst, and this was like my world every day. I was used to all these conferences and wearing this kind of clothing. And now I'm a venture capitalist, so it's kind of, I have to adjust my brain to this sort of topic again. But, look, from an investor's perspective, I think it's pretty simple. events, crises, unpredictable incidents happen all the time, right? Cycles are somewhat predictable, but there's always something that comes out of left field. And I think in this particular instance, it's very clear to many people I speak to that, if you're an investor in equities or debt instruments, that it's very hard to rely on historical models now, right? When they were, you could make these assumptions, you could tweak the model, this way and that, and spit out some kind of scenario that could get you to, I don't know, 60, 70%-ish probability of an outcome. But with that, very difficult to do these days. I think what that means for investors is they have to take a bit of a longer term perspective on what does this really mean? And I think conferences like this are an excellent way to make us think about for a second, not the day-to-day, what's markets doing up and down, every week, but rather take a step back and consider more thoughtfully how are each of these actors in the ecosystem, in the economic system that we're all operating in, going to react to these various changes in the assumptions that we've held. I live in Japan, I'm Japanese American, and I came to Japan or went to Japan in the early 90s. And if you recall, after the asset bubble of the late 80s, when that's what drew a lot of young people to study Japanese and go to Japan because we all thought that bubble would last forever. But it was also a time where there's a massive amount of trade friction and pressure on Japan to, hey, stop exporting your little cars to America, right? And hey, Japan, you should be buying more of American beef. You should be buying more American, steel and soybeans and all of that. So Japan has been through this. This is like a movie being played out again. And I think we go back in time and, I think the mistake that perhaps Japan made, if I don't know, I'm not an academic, but was that, yes, it had to react because there was so much pressure. For example, remember the Plaza Accord? I mean, all these young people in the back, you were not even born. But in 1985, the yen, which is today about 145 against the US dollar, was 360 yen against the US dollar, okay? So it was very competitive as a currency, and that was partly to blame for Japan's, dumping of all of its Japanese goods into markets like the United States. The Plaza Accord, remember, reset that exchange rate, right? From 360, I can't remember what it was, but to a much less competitive currency level. So some people that come to visit me in Tokyo from China, they say, what lessons would you impart for China and other economies that are undergoing this pressure from, for example, the United States? And I'd say, don't do the same. Don't reset your currency because somebody or some buddies have basically decided that would be the best thing. Because you know what? That triggered what? That was such a deflationary shock to Japan's economy. Japan had no choice but to dramatically ease financial conditions, i.e. cut interest rates. What did that give birth to? This massive asset bubble, right? With the value of the Imperial Palace was more than where I come from, the state of California. Right? It got so distorted, and then what had to happen? You had to shut down that party, and that began what Takuninami just mentioned, this 30-year deflationary, sleeping period for Japan. So I like to kind of, I don't know, history, whether it rhymes but never repeats itself, I don't know, but I think we need to just take a step back and consider, so how should Japan have reacted? And to me, I think with all these uncertain factors going on in the world, in particular from a Japan perspective, where the population is aging, the population is shrinking, yet it has still an enormous current account surplus. It has capital, and maybe not for long, but for now, what Japan really needs to do is develop domestic national resilience. It also has to figure out how to unleash and unlock untapped resources. I talked about, women in my womenomics research. It's not just women though, right? There's a lot of resources in the economy that are just shackled by unnecessary regulation that need to be freed up. So for me, I'm not specifically addressing the tariff question, I know. I think it's pretty simple that it's going to be very negative, particularly for the auto industry and related industries for the short term. But I think longer term, this is a wake-up call to really shock Japan into figuring out how are you going to become resilient. Supply chain resiliency, food security, cybersecurity, logistics, all of these things to me are areas as a venture capitalist actually present tremendous opportunities for new investments. And we're seeing, thankfully, a whole crop of new young people in Japan, actually not so young people, moving from big companies wanting to become entrepreneurs. So it's a really dynamic, scary but dynamic and exciting time for us in Japan.
Thanks, Kathy. And I think we'll try to hit on some of the ideas you mentioned just now, including opportunities, including how to posture yourselves going forward. If I may, Mara.
Sure, thanks. I was making sure my mic was on there. I also very much appreciate being here and being able to be in conversation with my fellow panelists and with all of you. I should say at the top of this, I am not a current policymaker in the United States. I'm about as far from that as it's possible to be. But I will say that for the time when the common thread through what may sound like a lot of disparate jobs I've had in and outside of government is that I've worked at the intersection of policy, politics, and process. And I actually don't think you can move anything forward policy-wise. Having a good idea is like maybe 5 to 10% of the equation, and the rest of it is understanding the process and the politics for how you move things forward. So I say that by way of starting to answer your question, I hope, and I want to do it in 3 parts. I am not going to start with America first for a bunch of reasons. What I'd like to start with is what I've observed about how some of the rest of the world is reacting to the various policies of President Trump's administration, including the tariffs, the trade and tariff approach that he has taken. I've watched closely as various foreign leaders have come to the United States for discussions or have met U.S. officials elsewhere. I've been very impressed, for example, by how the United Kingdom has handled both the first meeting, and then I'm not that surprised that they got a trade framework. I think a lot of this is more show than substance, that may reflect a president that came to power through being a TV celebrity as much as anything else, with no diss intended there to President Zelensky, by the way. So I want to be clear. But so Britain has been very effective in how they've handled this administration thus far. I thought actually Japan on the first visit, which I think may have been one of the first visits prior to the announcement of the tariff policies, again, took a very measured approach, seemed to recognize the type of president that they were dealing with, unique as he may be, and approached it effectively. I also think Mark Carney was another example in his meeting in the Oval Office and how he handled it. But I also think we should talk about the Trump effect in terms of, I don't know if there's anyone who contributed as much to Mark Carney's election in Canada as President Trump did. So there are positives to his administration. And I think the same is true in Australia in terms of the impact there. I don't think his comments are the sole factor, but I think it is something to watch and look at. So I do see various leaders in the rest of the world, in Europe, in Asia Pacific, in the Middle East, recalculating how to deal with the President of the United States. And I think that's smart to do that. I think it shows people, those who I think are doing best are figuring out what their ultimate goals are, so what policies they want to achieve, and what the politics are of navigating that. And it's not necessarily bowing and genuflecting, but it's taking the measure of the man that you're dealing with. I think within the United States, there is also, I believe, a growing recognition of the impact of these policies and of the approach. I think it's been tough in the first 100+ days, which I think someone earlier today, I heard in another conversation referred to as 100 years, I think inadvertently, but it feels like it's 100 years for many of us. And so much has happened so rapidly that it's tough to focus and to figure out how to address. But for the American people, including I think a number of the people who voted for President Trump, they are increasingly feeling and fearing the impact of his policies. The Wall Street Journal just today had an article that highlighted, and I commend it to folks to read, several small businesses in the United States throughout the country, red and blue states alike, and directly how they are being impacted by the tariffs, including having to go out of business, having to deflate their own personal savings accounts. There's a number of very compelling stories. And those are just in one article. That is replicated throughout the country. And so as people feel the real effect, and we will in the United States, it's very different from what the president has described to them. Those are all people who will be voting. They may not be voting immediately, but we have a midterm election for members of Congress and for the Senate in a year and 3/4 or close, but it still feels, a lot of us are focused on that site. I keep my own personal list of the senators that are up in 2 years, because I think for them there will be a calculation about, right now, the concern if you're a Republican is you're going to be primaried, that the president or his cohorts will put more money into somebody who's to the more extreme of you if you vote against him, and you'll lose a primary, and then you won't get to be in your seat again. I think at some point those senators will be calculating that they're going to lose a general election if they keep voting with the president. So we have both the impact on the small businesses of the tariffs, and then we also have votes that are coming up in our Congress, in the House and then the Senate, on the budget. And so these are domestic issues for us, but again with profound implications, because things like Medicaid are almost certainly going to be cut. And that's going to impact red states, Republican states, even more than blue states, for reasons I won't go into here. But there are going to be very tough votes, and members of Congress are going to be on record, and they know that. And so I think we'll start seeing, again, those impacts as we build to our midterms. And so my version of Kathy's taking lemons and making lemonade is that where I see the opportunities in the United States, and I think for the rest of the world, and particularly for liberal democracies or like-minded countries, is being able to make the argument about how important economic security is and what economic security means in direct personal terms for families, for businesses, and how that security requires both resilience within the country, but also relationships around the world. Going to Sir Robin's points from earlier today, it takes friends and alliances. When I worked for President Clinton, one of his kind of standard ways of thinking about the world, which I think was followed by both President Bush's and President Obama, is that the United States needs to go with others everywhere we can and go it alone only when we must. And that was because he saw that, and I think most other United States presidents have seen that, as directly in the United States interest, in our economic interests and in our security interests. And so, so I think there will be people in the United States pushing the narrative and showing the examples of how economic and national security are linked, and how, for the United States, they are undergirded by the rule of law. And I actually have a little prop that I brought up on that point, which is our Constitution. And our Constitution is actually, I think, like a national Bible, to the extent that there is one. And I have this with me, and you can see it's well used, because I've always carried it around with me. Because when I worked as a chief counsel at the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and when I worked in the White House, there are often times where I found to make my arguments, it was more powerful to open it up And I will say there was a point in the White House where I was told by the National Security Advisor that perhaps I didn't understand that the President of the United States wanted this funding for a particular purpose. And I said, I understand that, but I have to go to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue to the Congress, and they're going to tell me they're Article 1, he's Article 2, and they're the ones who write the checks. They're the ones who provide the money. And so that, at some point, as I said, there are going to be votes in Congress on these things, and then Article 3 is our courts. And the United States courts at this point are what many of us are relying on, and there have been a number of opinions working their way up to the Supreme Court. We've also had a Chief Justice who has very much pointed out publicly the value and the independence of our court system. So I think we are seeing in the United States at this point a real live test of the strength of rule of law and of how it undergirds our national and economic security. I think the rest of the world has long relied on that a contract with the United States means something. I think we currently have a president who may not have the same appreciation that many in the rest of the world, and certainly many in our country, have for the rule of law. But I think that we will see how courts challenge him and how it works. And that's where I see the opportunity, that it is possible that the United States comes out of this stronger. I think alliances in terms of the rest of the world and new partnerships, maybe not with the United States. The United States may have to play catch up in 2 or 3 years' time. But I think it's an important test. The United States has come back before from rough times and from not necessarily living up to our values and our interests, and I think we can again.
Thanks, Mara. Alicia, would you like to?
Thank you. So I know we're short of time, but I want to spend a minute thanking Shirley and Harry, because what I'm going to say would not be possible without you, because we've been discussing this thing since I remember, even before Trump, for that matter. And I think what I'm going to say probably, resonates. And I also want to thank Sir Robin. I can't even put the Sir because, in Spain we don't do that, as you know. But because what you said is what I'm going to say on an economic front. And there you go. I'm going to start right away. I'm going to add 2 T's. We have Trump, trade, and tariffs. And I want to add Taiwan and team. And you'll get that team, hopefully, if I get to the end. I'll be very quick. I'm going to talk about why we're here. Because it's not only about Trump. I wish it were only about Trump, because, that would be easier. There is an underlying reason why we're here. And I'll try to explain that. And where we're heading, with the blip of the communique that will come anytime soon on a US-China deal. It's not going to be any type of relevant deal, so where are we heading? And what is it in for Taiwan? And the team, that's the team. So on the first thing, why are we here? I think, after, again, reflecting with friends for so long, I think we're here because we have to be here. I know it's tough to hear this, that it all looks like, somebody slightly crazy, sorry to say that. No, we're here because the world is basically divided in 2 fronts. And Sir Robin said it very clearly, but this started even before, probably, you wrote your wonderful book, because this is about 2 incompatible economic models. You'll hear me because I'm an economist, so everything I think is, on the economic lens. When China enters the WTO, China was a small economy. And it's not only China. There's many deep state, non-market economies that are basically becoming larger and larger. Nothing wrong with that. It's a choice, okay? I mean, I'm not saying that that's a bad or a wrong model. I'm just saying it's incompatible with the market economy. Because the way in which deep state, sometimes even democratic, it doesn't have to be non-democratic, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are deep state countries with a semi-democratic let's put it this way, system. Maybe eventually it is no longer democratic. Basically running a model of, it's a mercantilist model, by which, you basically, when we say Trump doesn't think win-win, yes, but frankly, that was the case before Trump. The mercantilist model, I'm not talking about the US, I'm talking about countries which run basically wiping out everybody else's benefit. And you can do that in many ways. You can do that through industrial policy, through deflation, through both, which is the case today, and that's China. And frankly, maybe I would do the same if I were China. I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it. Maybe I would do it because I want to develop, I get it. But the point is that once you put these two systems together, they just don't work. So because this is so fundamental, the way forward, which is my second point, is clear. There's no alternative. It's either you converge, so, market economies, which is probably where Trump is heading, become deep state, state-driven economies with a big industrial policy, reshoring, I do my stuff, I consume, I produce, Or the other side becomes a market economy. That is not going to happen. We've been waiting since I remember, and China is not going to become a market economy. That we know. So if neither of the two become true, and when I say the US, I could talk about Europe or, for that matter, many other economies in the world, then there's only one way out, which is bifurcation. And that is what's going to happen. So when we talk about Cold War, we also basically see the reflection of that, or even the other way around for that matter. Maybe it starts with the economy. And that is what is pushing that Cold War. So our economies are bifurcating. You just have to look at the numbers. It's very obvious. Now the question is, moving to Taiwan and the team, what is your team? Because if you don't know what your team is, you'll basically be a bystander in this bifurcation. It might be better to be a bystander. Sorry, Switzerland was a bystander in the Second World War. It did well. So I'm not saying that a bystanding option is not a good option. I am nobody to judge. But the truth of the matter is that you need to know where you are or where you want to be. I'll read later. If I read that now, I won't be able to know what I'm saying. I'll finish very soon. So basically for me, here, when I talk about Taiwan and the team, is really the following. The team is not the US. It is not the US. And actually, I would rephrase what I just said. It's not Trump. Trump is not going to be there forever. I don't know what's coming next, but what I know is that when I play in a team, I don't play much, but say I play in a team, the team is not the captain. It's everybody else. And if the captain gets hurt, or actually the captain gets, whatever, the team doesn't like the captain, they choose another captain. They just force another captain. So this is what Japan did with CPTPP, didn't it? I mean, we need the rest of the liberal democracies, and again, I'm an economist, the market economists, let's put it this way, to react and say, excuse me, as Canada has done, as Australia have done, and I hope Europe will done, and it's very difficult for Europe, because we're 27 countries, and it's very easy to manipulate that. But hopefully, we can just say, I'm sorry, we don't like the captain. Not that you're out of the team, but you sit at the bench and you wait until you're back to your senses. That's what we need to do. Now, is Taiwan in this team? And this is for Taiwanese to decide. But that the world is moving in these two teams, this is so clear, like, the light out there. And it's not going to change because the models are simply incompatible. And they won't be compatible anytime soon. We've tried very hard, it doesn't work. So and this is not because of Trump. It is going to happen anyway. And I think for that matter, I think the only thing we need to decide here, I mean, this is for everybody else to decide, certainly not me, is where does Taiwan sit in this reality? That's all.
Thank you. We're passing around a note because, as you know, we're here discussing a topic that is very much current and transpiring on a real-time basis. And for example, just now across on our phones, it's been announced that following this weekend's meeting in Geneva, the U.S. and Chinese representatives have come to an interim agreement to suspend the reciprocal and retaliatory tariffs for 90 days, and as part of that agreement to reduce the U.S. on China tariffs from 145% to 30%, and then China on U.S. tariffs from 125% down to 10%. As they say on CNN, this is a developing story. So we're not going to spend too much time opining on where this deal goes. But I think, if I may draw on two threads just now that I heard in that last round, and I'll endeavor to do 2 more rounds of Q&A before our time is up today. We heard 2 themes, right? One is this idea that I threw out, this is the end of the world, of the alliance as we know it, right? That's one idea. And on the other, that we've seen versions of this before, okay? They're not necessarily contradictory, okay, or nor mutually exclusive, but I wanted to put it to our panelists to maybe share with us from their perspective and given their experiences going forward, looking forward, are you expecting, if you believe in the, let's call it this rules-based global order that we've all prospered from in the last many decades since the end of the last war, has the model changed? Is there a new normal in how we engage and how we do business with each other? To the point, again, we're seeing this transpiring as we speak, and I believe Brazil and some Latin American countries are off to Beijing next week as well. So, in short, maybe we start with Mara, if that's all right, Alicia, then Kathy. What's your view on this, on how we, on how the world works going forward? If we can keep us succinct.
Sure. Well, I don't think we're going to see a wholesale change. I think we're going to see shifts. And to what Alicia was saying, I think those who are like-minded about markets, who can maybe overcome what is a domestic political pressure for protectionism and accept the reality that for any of our countries to be at our strongest economically and in security terms, we have to have alliances and we have to work with others. I'll give one quick example. Critical minerals is the example that shows just the interlinkages between our economic interests and our national security interests, and the fact that if we're talking about mining, processing, and refining, for everything from the iPhones in front of everyone to the weapon systems we have, there's no one country, other than maybe China right now, who controls enough of the supply chain and who can make things work fast enough that we have to figure out ways to work with one another. So I think that, and you need rules and you need rule of law to make that happen in a binding way. So I think we'll see shifts. I think the United States is going to fall behind over the next couple of years, but I think other alliances that folks have been talking about have potential to fill some of these gaps.
Okay. So I think the question really is about what's next after the liberal order, if I hear you. Well, in this idea of bifurcation, which comes from the fact, you just said it very clearly, that because there's no trust, you cannot accept interdependence, which is basically asymmetric interdependence, let's face it. I mean, I think the US depends much more on critical raw materials from China, on, ibuprofen for that matter. I mean, things that are imported at 90+% from China. And China has been preparing for reducing this interdependence, You think about the cloud, think about, tech, so because of this, I think it's very hard to think of, that bifurcation has to happen because you need to reduce the interdependence because you don't trust the other one giving you that dependence. So that being said, that kind of divorce, if you want, slowly but steadily, and surely slower because the consequences are dramatic. So, you do this more smoothly. You just can't pay the price. Inflation in the US, deflation in China, overcapacity. So we're going to do this more smoothly, but the direction is clear. Now, in this kind of steady divorce, there used to be a house, an apartment that was shared. What was that? The liberal order, that was the WTO, the UN, everybody was there inside. So now the question is, who keeps the apartment? This is the question. Who keeps the apartment? Who controls the WTO if it remains in place? So, if you are living if you have the person living, so Trump, jumping and closing the door and leaving, this is very dangerous for the, sorry to say, market economy team, because how are you going to have a say in those institutions? So what I'm trying to say here is that we should watch out, everybody else, because it is a very, very risky moment, and this is very true for Taiwan. These institutions, think about the WTO, could suddenly be homeless, if you want. And I think this is something we all need to work on. It's kind of, okay, the liberal order is not working, but is there a way to keep it functioning? I think Europe is very aware of this. If there's anything Europe is aware of, is how do we keep these international organizations, this multilateral system working? Main reason is, if you empty it, it will be controlled, and it might be really very different from what you have in mind.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Alicia. And I think that the debate and conversation, if you're sitting in Japan, is, and I'm an American, is that the US, and if you just look at, it's not my opinion, if you just look at opinion polls in Japan about how people view the United States of America, and I think this probably goes for countries in Europe and other parts of Asia as well, is that level of respect, or, this is the country that's the guiding light, that sets all the rules, has gone down. There's no question in Japan that that's the feeling. And maybe it's associated with lack of trust and dependency, whatever. But the fact of life is that if that is true, then Japan, then Taiwan, then other countries need to fill that vacuum. Now, how they do that, there's all these different alliances, all these acronyms of different organizations across the globe. I don't know how, but I think that has to be done. On a completely or somewhat unrelated topic, I just had to, it really resonated with me, Mr. Lim from Temasek's comment about, what did he say about free trade has resulted in countries, I guess, jobs, the quality of jobs is just not as good as it once used to be. And I'll go further in saying that from a Japan perspective, the level of inequality, of course, Japan is also unequal, but the magnitude of inequality that we see in many parts of the world is astounding. And when that leads to the inaccessibility of normal people to healthcare, to maternal care, to affordable housing, that is a problem, right? And so get away from politics, Mr. Trump, just leave that aside. What is the world that we're looking at for our children and the generations to come? And I'm a little bit biased because I'm an American living in Japan for almost 4 decades. My kids have been riding the subways since they were like 8 years old on their own. I have never worried about them at night walking around. You drop a wallet, the story, it'll be delivered back to your office, with a little note, handwritten note. I hope it's not too dirty. Things like this. I know I'm a little bit extreme here, but you get my point. Japan has a ton of problems, okay? But it takes care of its people. Yeah, tax rates are bloody high. Believe me, bloody high. But you know what? You pay for what you get to some extent. And I think we all have to think about in our own societies, what kind of society do we want to create for our future generations? And that, to me, kind of gets to the heart of, let's strip away the politics, let's strip away all these alliances. What kind of society do we want for ourselves? And that, I think, is missing from this whole conversation. Sorry, I kind of went off track, but I was just stunned, or just moved by his comment about that. Because I think living as an American in a country like Japan, I really feel that whenever I go home, I was home a week ago, I really felt that. Yeah.
No, thank you. That's a perfect seg to something I wanted to please. We always have time for applause. We are short on time, but I do want to get in another, if I may, the final question, and I hope it blends a little bit from the questions that we received offline from some of you before this event. We've been talking a lot about the impact and the consequences of what's headlining this panel and this event more broadly, and we all understand that the impact can be devastating, can be depressing, right? It's affecting livelihoods, wiping out savings, and affecting jobs and our future, certainly our future generation. And so it sounds like a lot of doom and gloom. But I wanted to give our panelists an opportunity, and really to follow up on what Kathy, you really got us, this path you've gotten us down to, the path you've guided us towards from your opening remarks and just now as well, thinking about this opportunity to reset, this opportunity to recalibrate where we're headed, our direction. And so maybe you can help us paint a little bit of the, help us find the silver lining, if you will, in what's happening now. I think of, from the security world, NATO's how NATO's been reinvigorated to reinvest in defense, to enhance resilience, to enhance their independence, which, putting politics aside, is a good outcome, we would agree. Right, so maybe just talk a little bit more on the opportunities ahead from your respective fields or region, and hopefully that will set up. We can end on a very positive note. Hopefully, I think we're down. This last order is, if I may, Alicia, Kathy, then Mara.
Okay, so I'm going to put my European hat, although I don't live there, but I don't think Europe has woken up to that title. And it's not only because of the tariffs, it's just because of this deep sense of loss. It's a loss. I mean, the US is a model for Europe. And, just seeing that degradation is so sad for Europe, and let alone Ukraine and everything else. But it's really about not seeing what you used to see. But the silver lining of anything like that is that you wake up, because you've been sleeping believing that somebody could do the job for you, and you could just, and I think this is so obvious in Europe. So now the question is, can you live up to your own understanding? I mean, now we get it. Are you ready to act? Because that's a different level. I can see that happening in some countries in Europe. I don't know whether this will be enough. We had a discussion, Sanjay and I, on, I can't read the future. But what I know is that Europe has woken up. And that's good, because when we talk about this idea of multilateralism, Europe is based on multilateralism. It will never be hard power or, great power. It can't play great power competition because it doesn't even believe in it. And I think having poles in the world that do not believe in great power competition is in itself a good thing for the world. Because if the whole idea is that we have more great powers out there, then what? We will have the same thing we're seeing now, but with more players. The idea here is not to fight more fights. It's to really go back to a softer environment. And that's why I just hope Europe wakes up, not only says it's waking up.
We have time for that.
I'll just add, so I'm living and working in the world of startups, and we invest both in Japan but also outside of Japan. So every day I listen to pitches by very passionate, energetic, young people like all of those in the back of this room. And I can't help but feel incredibly optimistic because you know what, the earlier comments, the first panel about AI, well, we're seeing entrepreneurs that can build businesses and get to 10 million, 50 million revenues, US dollars, in record time thanks to AI, right? And when we talk about all the world's problems and all the doom and gloom, well, that to me is, you know, what did he say earlier also, the same gentleman from Temasek? I'm here to solve problems, right? Those problems are opportunities. From climate change, we're meeting incredible green tech companies, sustainable, what do they call, alternative, you know, protein companies. It's just fascinating. So to me, I can't help but feel optimistic because I think that particularly your generation and across this region, sitting in Japan, we're seeing so many people from Asia, young people from Asia coming to Japan, wanting to build companies in Japan. It costs really nothing to hire an engineer, by the way, in Japan. They're very cheap. But it's so exciting to see the collaboration happening across borders within Asia. So I'm super excited. I hope there are more Taiwanese young people and people from everywhere to come to Japan and build together. So let's build a brighter future together.
So where I see the opportunity for the United States, and I think for the rest of the world, starts from, Kathy, what you said just before, which is that in the worst of times, you're forced to confront what you're really about as a person, as a country, as a world, and what kind of world and what kind of country you want to live in. And for the United States, there is still the opportunity for every individual to have an impact and to make a difference. And to choose a different future than we have in front of us right now. And so I see the opportunity, and I would never bet against my fellow citizens, even though they may have very much disappointed me in who they elected as president. But I think the United States has still unlimited ability to correct itself, and we have other times before, and to build from where we are and take the facts that we have and climb back up. And I think that's both the measure of a person and a country, and the ability not just to do well when you're riding high, but to be able to get back up when you've been knocked down.
Thank you. Selfishly, I would love nothing more than to continue this conversation, but I know that if I carry on, Shirley is smiling at me from the front row, I will never get invited back. But it goes without saying, it's very clear that 15 minutes is not enough for the distinguished panelists we have on stage with us here today. It's clear that each one of them can headline an entire event on their own. Given the limited time, I hope that we've heard pieces of insights here that allow us to all go back now, because the next step is to go back and act on and develop the insights and threads that we've that follow up on these threads that was just mentioned just now. Indeed, because so much is at stake. I also think back to Chairman Lim's from Temasek, his comment earlier on globalization and how the end of globalization came about probably when it stopped providing jobs that ensured good wages. And I think that's a good theme to come back to, because even though on printed above us, behind us on the screen, is the topic. The topic of this panel is economic resilience, but the implications certainly go far beyond the economy, go far beyond markets and returns, because it affects confidence. More than confidence, it affects our jobs. More than jobs, it affects our politics and our security. So in other words, economic resilience really is the foundation to our democratic resilience. And so our democracy depends on us getting this right. I want to thank our distinguished panelists here for sharing the stage, for being generous with their time. And I would, as our last collective action for this afternoon, with me at least, if I can invite all of you to give our panelists a very, very, very warm round of applause.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue with the applause to thank our panelists and also our moderator for doing such a fantastic job and also pointing out the silver lining for all of us, and we can go back home and take action and build the society and future we want together. And we have now reached our final panel discussion of the day. The title is Research, Collaboration, and International Exchange, Preserving Innovation and Nurturing Global Talent Amid Radical Decoupling. We'll begin with an introduction by Deputy Minister Chen Ming-chi of Foreign Affairs and former Deputy Minister of Mainland Affairs Council, Republic of China, Taiwan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Deputy Minister Chen to the stage. Thank you. So, Deputy Minister Chen, the floor is now yours.
All right. So, good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Shirley, for the kind invitation, and thank you to our moderator, Ms. Rachel Bernstein, for the generous introduction. So let me begin by sharing a bit about my background. I am a professor of sociology and contemporary Chinese society at the National Tsinghua University. In the early 2000s, along with several colleagues, I helped establish our master program in contemporary China studies. Each year, I brought my Taiwanese students to China for their first fieldwork experience. I also taught courses on Chinese society and mainstream sociological subjects, many of which attract Chinese students. I had the privilege of supervising several of their theses. One, for example, focused on the lawful resistance of Chinese LGBTQ movement. This experience deepened my understanding of Chinese society, and I believe they help those students better understand Taiwan, especially how our democracy emerged through hard-won struggles and how cultural diversity and political pluralism are lived reality here. At the same time, we welcome visiting Chinese scholars engaged in joint research projects. Those were the golden years of globalization. Back in the 1990s, there was a widespread belief that free trade would lead to political liberalization. The idea was that free market would reward human capital and elevate individuals, especially those repressed under socialist regime, into middle class. And once economically empowered, they would begin to demand political rights. In that vision, democracy will follow development. Similarly, academic exchange and the talent circulation, the forerunner of globalization, were seen as vital drivers of scientific progress and innovation. Any disruption was considered both ineffective and counterproductive. As globalization accelerated, so did commercialization of higher education. Even traditionally non-tradable sectors, like universities, were open to international competition. In liberal democracies, many institutions began recruiting large numbers of Chinese students to boost both revenues and international influence. At one point, Chinese students account for nearly half of all international enrollments in some countries. This creates structural dependency. And when such dependency intersects with strategic intent of the Chinese Communist Party, vulnerability emerges. the Confucius Institute are one such example. What began as a free language classes and the cultural programming evolved, according to the late anthropologist Marshall Shirley, into academic malware that compromise academic freedom and institutional integrity. The CCP play a long game, weaponizing academic exchange for technology transfer and even for exporting censorship, or in service of its geopolitical objectives. In Taiwan, we saw this dynamic shift sharply. After President Tsai Ing-wen took office, cross-strait academic exchange slowed. China's way of punishing a recalcitrant leader and come to a near halt during the COVID-19 pandemic. I witnessed this not only as a professor, but also as Deputy Minister of Mainland Affairs Council during President Tsai's first term. Some universities in Taiwan financially depend on Chinese tuition, practice self-censorship. They avoid sensitive topics in class, not because of direct CCP intervention, but out of fear that future Chinese enrollment might be curtailed. As the renowned sinologist Perry Link once said, CCP's influence is like an anaconda in the chandelier. Its mere presence induces silence, even if it never strikes. Ironically, it wasn't Taiwan that shut the door. Just 1 month before President Tsai's second inauguration, China announced it would hold all applications for Chinese students to study in Taiwan. Though there was no formal ban on exchange students, the effect was the same. Cross-strait academic exchange were effectively frozen amid worsening relations and pandemic restrictions. Yet, Taiwan's international student number has continued to grow. While Chinese enrollment has sharply declined, students from other countries have filled the gap. Globalization is not equivalent to sinicization. Meanwhile, Taiwanese scholars were increasingly unwilling to travel to China. Many have faced harassment, being detained for hours at airports and subject to intense questioning. Under such conditions, true academic exchange is impossible. At the same time, Taiwan has become more globally engaged. When China dominates the global conversation, Taiwan is often overlooked. That is no longer the case. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has invested in global exchange programs such as the Co-Prosperity Project, Taiwan Fellowship, Talent Cultivation Initiative, and the new Southbound Elite Program, and the Taiwan-U.S. Education Initiative. In collaboration with the Ministry of Education and the National Science Council, we also aim to attract scholars seeking an alternative to the increasingly difficult environment in the higher education elsewhere. Academic freedom and international cooperation are the lifeblood of scientific progress. But the runaway globalization of the early 21st century has come with real national security costs. As we now face a potential global realignment, this may be the right moment to revisit the assumption that underpin the last era. Let me close by invoking the wisdom of Karl Polanyi, a celebrated historian of globalization. In his study of the last great era of globalization, Polanyi warned that unregulated market cause massive social dislocation and eventually fuel destructive populist movements, culminating in Second World War. What followed, however, was a different form of globalization that governed Deglobalization, anchored in the Bretton Woods system. By looking back at the European history since the 19th century, we gain valuable perspective on today's challenge. It also offers insight into how we might better shape the future by balancing free exchange with democratic resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with a round of applause, thank Deputy Minister Chen for such an informative introduction. Please return to your seat. And now, with that foundation and tone set with the introduction, Ms. Bernstein, the stage is now fully yours.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Chen, for those insightful remarks. As introduced, my name is Rachel Bernstein, and I'm a Fulbright grantee at National Dengzhi University. I want to first thank Shirley, Caroline, and the CAPRI team for inviting me to moderate this important and timely panel. This panel discussion on research, collaboration, and international exchange comes at a time when these trends and debates are converging. As US-China strategic competition has intensified in recent years and even weeks, as discussed in several of our last panels, so too have debates regarding the risks and benefits of academic ties between the two countries. Some experts worry that collaborative research programs pose high risks for fueling China's civil-military fusion program, as Dr. Robin Niblett discussed earlier this morning, forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft. Others emphasize that international academic and research exchange is needed to tackle universal issues like climate change and promotes a more understanding and an innovative global community. Amid this ongoing debate, new shocks have been introduced by the Trump administration, including cuts to research exchange programs, student visas, and development funding. As Deputy Minister Chen just discussed in his opening remarks, Taiwan is also at the forefront of this debate and must continue to leverage and sustain its highly innovative and technologically advanced society while remaining vigilant to existential security threats from China. So, with this brief context in mind, I'll now introduce each of our distinguished speakers whose expertise and backgrounds will make for an insightful and productive discussion. I'll introduce the speakers in the order that they'll be speaking, responding to the first question, before diving right into the heart of the discussion, as our panel time is actually quite short today. So first and foremost is Professor Wei Shi, an academician at Academia Sinica and a member of CAPRI's International Advisory Council. Prior to joining Academia Sinica, he was president of the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology and chair professor of mechanical and aerospace engineering. Next, we have Professor Harry Harding, a Yushan scholar and university chair professor at National Chengchi University. He is also a CAPRI board member. He has served as the founding dean of University of Virginia's Frank Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy, in addition to founding the Asia program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. And he has served on the boards of several educational and nonprofit institutions, as well as on the US-China Joint Commission on Science and Technology and US Defense Policy Board. Rounding out the panel is Dr. Randall Nadeau. Dr. Nadeau is the executive director of the Foundation for Scholarly Exchange, also known as Fulbright Taiwan. He is a scholar of Asian religion, and prior to his position at Fulbright, he served as distinguished professor of religion at Trinity University. Dr. Nadeau has participated in and helped organize faculty-led study abroad programs in Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong, and China, promoting intercultural learning and academic collaboration between the United States and East Asian institutions. So I want to get right into the heart of the panel, as we have to stop at 4:45 for our next speaker. So unfortunately, I will ask that you all keep your remarks brief so we can kind of get into the discussion. So I'm wondering if you could all please first share your perspectives on the debate regarding academic decoupling. What does international academic and research collaboration look like today in the current geopolitical landscape? And how does this impact your current positions? You all come to this panel having extensive experience with academia, research, and also in more practical ways as well. So I'd welcome your insights. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My own area is aerospace engineering, and I went to the US when Taiwan was still under martial law. So Taiwan has changed a lot, for sure. Mainland China has also changed a lot in different ways. When it comes to academic change and the possible collaboration, with all the current intertwining relationship and the codependence, I personally think it's not practical to decouple as being projected. The flagship journal of my professional society, Aerospace AIA Journal, still has members on the editorial board from mainland China. They still participate and contribute. Actually, the journal has probably, I would imagine, at least 30% of the papers submitted and published from China. So that's a fact, which is just one example. And I would say that, in essence, with all the fast change, not only in China or everywhere else, it probably is not very advisable not to try to get a front seat in the room, and instead we want to work out, because that will not be practical. Because that doesn't solve problem. Actually, that will put even more asymmetric situation worse.
Great, thank you very much. Professor Harding, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of this panel, and especially to be with two people who have great experience and whom I respect very much, Professor Shirley and Randall from the Fulbright Foundation here in Taiwan. I just want to make 2 points today. One is to underscore and to emphasize how much we have to help others understand the importance of both student exchange and scholarly exchange. I think that we often forget that, but let me give you a few points from my own experience and experience of some of my students to try to remind you about how important these opportunities are. Let's begin with student exchange. I actually never did engage in student exchange because I fell victim to some of the problems that block it and that we have to address, not just restoring funding, but overcoming some of the obstacles to student exchange. When I went to college, I went to Princeton, we had very, very few student exchange programs in those years. This was the early 1960s. And most of those that did occur, of course, were the traditional second semester, the freshman year abroad, or at least a freshman semester abroad, more likely. That was very difficult for students at Princeton to undertake, for the very simple reason that in addition to having a mandatory senior thesis, we also had a mandatory junior paper. And therefore, it competed directly with this. Very difficult to do both things at the same time, at the same semester. That was also true at other universities that I worked with or attended. In graduate school, for example, there were very, very few opportunities for study abroad programs for students in political science. I did come to Taiwan to do language study, but basically there was no other opportunity to really take courses on China or on any other part of the Asia Pacific region. So opportunities were more limited then than they were today. But nonetheless, I was able to travel abroad thanks to my parents, who were, my father particularly was a very globalized person. And he organized the opportunity for me to travel both here to Taiwan, also to Europe, and also to Hong Kong. And there I learned something very, very important. And that is I learned both how similar and how different other countries, other peoples in other countries are to Americans, how they deal with the same issues, seize the same opportunities, but deal with them in different ways. It was a way of understanding other parts of the world, but it was also an opportunity to see how other countries are both similar and different from the United States. Not just to learn about them, but to view the United States through the mirror that they presented to us. And that's the idea that we just heard about in the previous panel, that we need to decide what country we, whether we're Americans or Taiwanese or Japanese or any other part of the world, what kind of society we want for ourselves will be greatly enhanced by our opportunity to see how other countries solve or at least address similar problems, where they succeed, where they fall short. That is the most important thing that I learned from my early experience at traveling abroad. Studying abroad, which I did finally do here, of course, introduced me to a very different culture that I have spent much time in before. But there again, it was the same, to understand how Taiwanese are both similar to and different from Americans, and to get a better sense of my own country by what I saw and I experienced here. With regard to the second topic that we're discussing, and that is scholarly exchange as opposed to student exchange, there I would also echo what Professor Shirley has been saying about the importance of this kind of cooperation. I'm in a very, very different area than he is. I'm more of a humanist than even a social scientist, and certainly more of a social scientist than a mechanical aeronautical engineer or a engineer of any kind. And yet I did have the experience at a fairly early stage in my career to start cooperating with scholars in mainland China, as well as scholars in other parts of the world, including scholars in my own country, to do a series of projects, collaborative projects that I think greatly contributed to both my understanding and I hope contributed to the scholarly community more broadly. For the sake of time, I'll mention only one. It's the one I'm most proud of, and that was the first scholarly collaboration between younger Chinese and American scholars to do a joint study of the history of U.S.-China relations. This was conducted with my colleague Yuan Ming of Peking University of Beida, and many of the younger scholars that she assembled who were studying in China about the U.S.-China relationship. What we did was we not only had younger scholars from both countries, but at the same time we also insisted that each country write about the history, not of their own country, but about the other, to show that they had understood to the satisfaction of their counterparts from the other country, how each side viewed the various issues and problems that we conducted our studies on. So in short, I think that there are so many experiences from my own, that have made me understand personally the importance of both student exchange and scholarly exchange. And so it's an enormous tragedy that some people in powerful places in important countries seem to be concerned about the risks and the costs as they see them, or simply don't understand the benefits. And I hope that everyone here will use their influence and raise their voice to try to persuade what a loss to them, what a loss it would be if China and the United States and other countries as well refuse to take advantage of the great benefits that both scholarly exchange and students exchange provide to their own countries and to their counterparts abroad. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Dr. Harding couldn't have said better what the Fulbright vision is, and he articulated so well the values of the program, which is to bring people together through cultural and educational exchange. Fulbright had this vision in 1946, signed into law by Harry S. Truman. The Department of State is located in the Harry S. Truman building. So it shows how public diplomacy, these people-to-people exchanges are so important to international relations at a fraction of the cost of other kinds of diplomatic relationships. Trump 1.0 terminated, suspended the Fulbright program in China in 2021. We inherited 35 Fulbrighters who were to be going to China, and they came to Taiwan instead. And I think it was a terrible decision to make, but it was part of a trend that we've been seeing. And the numbers speak for themselves. There were 25,000 American students in China 6 years ago. Now there are fewer than 1,000. I'm told by David Arasi at the Hopkins Nanjing Institute that they're back to full strength in applications. That's true at the Duke program, Duke Kunshan, and NYU. But those, frankly, are kind of a niche market. And when you look at study abroad numbers overall, they're way down. And I don't see them recovering very much in China. In Taiwan, we're up 250% in Americans doing study abroad here in Taiwan. Still a relatively small number, about 1,600 now. But for the Fulbright program, in every category, US students, English teachers, US scholars, Taiwan students, we set new records this year in application numbers. And in the 5 years since the US-Taiwan Education Initiative, we have seen the number of Fulbrighters grow from about 180 5 years ago. This year I have 440. Over 100 Taiwanese in the US and over 300 Americans here in Taiwan. So we're going strong, and we're going to continue to build on what we're doing. Now, the White House budget that has been proposed has a 93% reduction in funding for the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Exchange of the State Department, which oversees Fulbright programs. But to be fair, in Trump 1.0, he had 0 for Fulbright. And last year, when I visited Congress, I targeted representatives who were on the Taiwan caucus, which is the largest caucus, by the way, in the House of Representatives. I targeted people on in the Taiwan caucus who are also in appropriations. And I won't name names, but I visited Democrats, visited Republicans, all 100% fully behind Fulbright. Not only are they supporters of Taiwan, but of our efforts here in Taiwan in the Fulbright program. And I would just close by saying that, or tell an anecdote. We sponsored a Mandarin education conference a couple of years ago, and we invited as our keynote speaker the Director of North American Affairs for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he came and he said, I never imagined that I would be invited to give a keynote address and so emphasize language study, whether English in Taiwan or Chinese in the US, as being at the heart of diplomatic relations between our two countries. But that's true that this is a major initiative of our Fulbright program, bringing English teaching assistants to Taiwan and sending Mandarin teachers to the US. And we're doing that in higher numbers than we've ever done before. And the other program that I'm very proud of is our master's degree programs. Rachel's one of our good representatives of that. We bring American students to Taiwan on Fulbright Awards to get master's degrees in Taiwan, some of them taught in Mandarin, and we now have 12 different degrees that we offer in Mandarin, along with about double that number that are taught in English. So the Mandarin taught programs are in diplomacy, in Chinese medicine, in Austronesian language studies. And these show our commitment to not just language study, but content study using the language, using Mandarin. It's true that Chinese language enrollments are down in the US, as are other foreign language enrollments, but I see that as an opportunity for Taiwan, because students are going to choose more and more to come here rather than going to the mainland for their language study. And Taiwan is developing a significant market in this area. More and more master's degrees in teaching Mandarin as a second language, and more international students coming here to do their language studies. So I think we have great opportunities despite the ongoing turbulence from the State Department side. but real opportunities for growth and development in our binational language, cultural, and educational exchange.
Great. Thank you so much, all three of you, for those great remarks. We are coming to the end of our panel, but I want to ask one more question, which you all can use as an opportunity to kind of wrap up your thoughts and your remarks. But since the theme of this conference is about building resilience, and Professor Harding and Dr. Nadeau, you both mentioned severe impacts from the Trump administration in terms of funding and opportunities, I'm wondering, how do you think the Asia-Pacific region can kind of build its resilience? Are there opportunities for further regional collaboration to kind of fill this gap that the United States is leaving? And how can we continue to pursue this academic and research collaboration? Thank you. Maybe perhaps we'll go down the line, starting with you, Dr. Nadeau, and then end with Dr. Xu.
Yeah, well, one of the things I would say very quickly is that more and more American scholars and students are going to be coming to Taiwan for their sinological studies, for their studies of China. And it kind of goes back to my generation. I mean, 40 years ago, I was a young graduate student studying China, and it was more practical to come to Taiwan, which was preserving Chinese culture, right? This was still during the martial law period. Now we have a similar circumstance where we're going to see scholars of Chinese history, Chinese politics, Chinese literature and language coming to Taiwan to do their sinology. I think it's a golden opportunity for Taiwan. It's a different environment now. The professors and researchers at Academia Sinica 40 years ago were mainlanders. They were intellectuals who escaped communism. Now we have a new generation of students and scholars who are looking at China in a sense from the outside. But it's a great opportunity for Taiwan, I think, to develop in this area, this study of China in all aspects, whether political or cultural, and to be a leading edge, a leading force for open, free, research-based study of Chinese history and culture.
Well, I will say exactly about Randall's comments that he kindly said about mine. I couldn't have put it better myself. Of course, there's an amazing opportunity now for Asia collectively, as well as individual countries and societies in Asia, to pick up the slack and give the opportunities for American and other foreign students that may be experiencing more obstacles or reduced funding, especially in the United States. But I think that the main message that I would give to anyone who wants to do this, whether it's one country or a group of countries, this will always be a very competitive business, interestingly, that students abroad and scholars abroad will find many opportunities to choose from. And therefore, I think that they have to think very creatively and design programs in consultation with the students and scholars that they wish to attract if they're going to succeed. I think too many universities, especially in the United States, simply think that if they offer it, others will come. That may be true to a degree, but I think that that kind of will simply offer what we always offer, and foreign students will come and they'll have a good time and learn something, is an overtly passive way of doing it. So I think that we need not only the resilience that we've been talking about, how we can save these programs and these opportunities in times of stress, but we also need innovation and creativity to design the programs that will attract students and scholars and will enable them to make an even greater contribution, both to their own countries, to their own careers, and globally as well. Thank you.
All right, Professor Xu, 1 minute. I just got a note saying that the mayor is waiting.
My main point is Taiwan for sure has a very beneficial role to play right now by attracting many more overseas students to come here to study. But the issue is much more than Chinese culture, language, and history. That's only a part of it. I think Taiwan should be more confident because Taiwan has many things to offer, high tech and innovation included. And that part, again, Taiwan should find a way to naturally integrate into the international society because this is not political. This is about education. And that, I would say, has least barrier unless we choose to impose such a barrier ourselves.
Great, thank you. And with that, please give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so much for your remarks.
Thank you. Also, a big thank to our moderator for doing a great job. Our mayor has a special perspective, and he is going to share how it's going to shape Taipei's future. And now, he's going to talk about creating a resilient city in an era of deglobalization. Mayor Zhang, the floor is now yours.
Well, thank you to CAPRI, Chair Professor Shirley Lin, and Vice Chair Sanjoy Joshi for the kind invitation. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the International Advisory Council and senior fellows from around the world who have joined us here today in Taipei. Good evening to all distinguished guests. It's an honor to join you today to talk about building resilience, especially in a time when the world feels more uncertain than ever. Let's start with something very real and close to home: safety. For a city, the most direct measure of resilience is this: when something shakes it, literally or figuratively, does it stand strong? On April 3rd last year, Taiwan's east coast was hit by a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. It was the strongest quake we've seen in 25 years. It happened during the morning rush hour, but within 5 minutes, Team Taipei was activated entirely. Every department knew where to go and what to do. In the past, we had a single centralized building, the Emergency Operations Center. Now, we've also improved to a mobile and decentralized model. Different departments can coordinate and respond together in real time and with more flexibility. Next month, we will be launching a brand new cloud-based disaster response system. It combines on-the-ground reports, real-time data dashboards, and AI analysis of weather, earthquakes, and past disasters. It helps us forecast damage before it happens, so we can act before it's too late. But earthquakes are not our only threat. Climate change is making extreme weather more common, and Taipei has to be ready. Let me give you an example. Our drainage system. It was originally built to handle about 78.8 millimeters of rain per hour. That used to be enough, but now we know it's not. So we made a bold decision. Over the next 5 years, we're investing over $200 million US, while actually with current exchange rate, probably closer to $216 million US, to upgrade our flood prevention systems. Our goal is to increase the city's capacity by 13%, from 78.8 millimeters to 88.8 millimeters per hour. One of the key projects is a massive underground detention tunnel in the Dunbei area, which is the center of the city. It will hold the equivalent of 16 standard swimming pools of rainwater. But instead of digging up huge areas and disrupting daily life, we use a more surgical approach. We will use a tunnel boring machine, the same kind we use to build our MRT subway lines, 40 meters underground. Above ground, all you will see is a small construction zone in a public park. No blocked roads, no disruption to daily life. This is smart infrastructure, big impact, small footprint. In addition to natural disasters, we also focus on wartime readiness. In Taiwan, that's something we cannot ignore. 2 years ago, we added missile strike simulations to our annual One Air Raid drills. We practice emergency evacuations at train stations and shelter setup. Last year, we simulated a missile strike on the water purification plant and trained crews on how to fix it quickly. And this year, we are cooperating with the central government and combining civil defense and disaster drills into a new urban resilience exercise. We have already conducted 4 tabletop war games to prepare. Now these drills are about prevention, but some threats are constant, every day, every hour. I'm talking about cybersecurity. Let me tell you something surprising. The Taipei city government faces nearly 20 million attempted cyber attacks per year. That's right, 20 million. So we invest heavily in digital defense. Our Department of Information and Technology alone spends 43% of its IT budget on cybersecurity. We protect over 40,000 devices across the city with multi-layer endpoint protection. An AI-driven smart city that I would like to build with my team ambitiously for our next generation relies on a trustable cybersecurity infrastructure. We were the first local government here in Taiwan to publish the official AI application guidelines for using AI in public services. And we are working with major AI firms like NVIDIA and AMD. Both of their Taiwan headquarters are in Taipei, and we are encouraging them to expand their R&D footprint in our city. Why? Because AI is in Taipei. TAIPEI. And here's another example of how we use technology to innovate policy and build resilience. From a surprising place, a bottle of fresh milk. Since January, our central government has shut down the weekly meal program for school children because of the cold chain logistics and distribution issue. But I thought the policy was worth saving. Healthy kids build a healthy city. So we launched our own milk policy, the Taipei Milk Weekly. But we did it differently. We partnered with convenience stores. Taiwan has the second highest density of the convenience stores in the world. And based on the city-owned enterprise, Easy Card Corporation, we use our city's smart IC card system. Now students or their parents can tap their student ID card once a week at a convenience store and get a free bottle of fresh milk. This program combines tech, logistics, and health. And after 1 month, it already has an 87% approval rate among citizens. More importantly, it opens up new possibilities. If we can deliver milk, maybe we can use the same system to distribute emergency supplies in crisis. Now, I want to end with a personal reflection. Taipei is not just a city of systems and technologies. At its heart, it's a city for people. And our greatest strength is diversity. Last year, when I gave a speech at Harvard Kennedy School, I said Taipei is like a hapa. We can put all kinds of ingredients into a hapa, and the result is always something rich and full of flavor. Taipei is traditional and modern, Eastern and Western. This city has been governed by 3 different political parties through elections. We host more protests and marches than any other city in Taiwan. That's not chaos, it's democracy in action. I love this diversity, and as the youngest mayor in Taipei's history, I'm deeply grateful for the trust people have placed in me. Taipei held Asia's first LGBTQ Pride back in 2003, long before Taiwan legalized same-sex marriage. Today, there is still a rainbow walkway in front of Taipei City Hall. Diversity is Taipei's pride. And if I had to choose one word to describe the spirit of this city, it would be democracy. Democracy is Taipei's DNA. It's what allows us to be open, inclusive, and resilient. Like hot pot, it might make you sweat, but you always want to have another bite. And in Taipei, we believe democracy is how we handle disagreements, how we move forward, and how we stay strong, no matter how the world shakes around us. As the mayor of Taipei, my mission is to uphold a city that stays diverse, open, and inclusive for people of all ages, genders, backgrounds, and cultures. Just like ingredients in a hot pot, we don't compete, we blend. And that harmony reflects our political resilience too. I'm fully committed to protecting the freedoms of our people. Freedom of speech, freedom of belief. We will never let Taipei become a place where only one voice is allowed. When we face different opinions, we hold everyone to the same standard. No double standards. We don't suppress them. We let democracy and the people decide. According to the 2025 Happy City Index, released by the UK-based Institute for Quality of Life, Taipei has risen from 46th place last year to 8th this year globally. So this remarkable progress is a testament not only to our city's development, but also to the strength of Taipei's democratic resilience. Once again, thank you to CAPRI for the kind invitation, and thank you all for your attention. I warmly welcome you again to Taipei. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor John. Thank you for sharing with us your blueprint for building a resilient city. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for your participation, and we also would like to thank all the moderators and speakers for contributing to such a fantastic event. And now, we would like to invite Sanjoy back to the stage in front of the podium as our forum draws to a close. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome Mr. Sanjoy Joshi to give the concluding thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley, CAPRI, for getting me here to speak to this August gathering. Following Mayor Chang's act is going to be a Herculean task because he practically has summed up this conference better than I could ever have about what resilience means and what being small and fighting back and using technology to create resilience really means. So I'm going to be short. I'll just take about 5 to 7 minutes concluding this. We have a great day of discussions, great ideas thrown forward, and I'll not even try to sum them all up. That is going to be impossible. I'll just pick some strands from it from here and there. And let me get back by starting with Kathy's directive, strip away the politics and start looking at what is this all about when we start talking resilience. See, we are actually in a situation what does it mean to strip away the politics? When you strip away the politics, it also means stripping away the power equations that politics is power of. And those power equations, politics is about power. Exertion of power, whether at the domestic level, that goes into democratic cycles, elections, and how do you address domestic audiences. Trump faces it. Even President Xi faces it, even if they don't have elections. It is also at the global level when it comes into geopolitics. And any discussion which we have seen today, when we start discussing many of these issues, will have geopolitics as an important component of it. And Robin gave that excellent talk right in the morning, breaking it down for all of us. The power play of global geopolitics, which manifests itself today in these big geopolitical shifts which we are seeing, strip that away, strip the politics away from it. What are we left with? We are left with, two large political economies handling a situation where the political economies are spinning out of control. And this is not to do with Trump. Let us understand that. Trump is a symptom. He is not the cause. There are deeper reasons. So when people in the global south start thinking about this, some of the bigger countries, some larger countries start thinking about it, the question that arises in their minds and should be central to everyone's minds is that what if the typical Hollywood what is movies, imagine about it, what if these shifts are not temporary? They do not last for the next election cycle, but there are deeper reasons why these are going to be permanent. Why this kind of tectonic shifts are going to be permanent. Then how do we handle it? How do we build resilience in the face of this? And when you start looking at this, then the situation changes. A typical response in many countries would be, okay, when two big elephants fight, as the African saying goes, don't be the grass and get trampled by it. So get out of the way. And the other solution which is given is, no, don't be the grass. Be rather like that reed, the elephant grass, which sways, grows tall and sways, and the elephant needs it. And that is how you survive. So these are methodologies which are being practiced by many countries in this kind of situation. And when we move forward, when we start looking around us, so that is how countries, at least the middle powers, are kind of practicing this formula for resilience. And what they start doing is build regional partnership, build regional alliances, build smaller structures of a local globalization, a regional globalization, and try to move on with their own markets. RCEP is a primary example. The ASEAN countries are a primary example of what they're trying to do in this game. They don't want to choose. They do not want to be forced into making a choice. So that is one option. What do the smaller countries do? And how do they handle this kind of situation? When Goliaths fight, see, there is, always remember, the fatal flaw that Goliath makes. What was the fatal flaw that Goliath makes? It is believing that scale gives security. No, it is believing that dominance alone is enough to create stability. And that just the sheer fact of having access by its power also gives control over the geopolitics of the situation. But what happens when along comes David with a slingshot And we heard an excellent presentation by Mayor Chang about how does David respond. Taiwan is all about that kind of response. How do you handle this uncertainty? See, hubris is not just a flaw, this vulnerability, the idea that you have one fatal flaw somewhere, that one vulnerability the powerful have, which brings them down. It's not just embedded in tragic heroes. It is not just embedded in empires. It is embedded in our supply chains. And we see how that little one pebble in the boot hobbled the biggest and the mightiest during COVID. When smaller countries actually ended up responding far better than the high and the mighty and the large. Taiwan is a prime example of how you handle COVID. So the large states are like supertankers. They take a long, big circle to turn. And they have problems. When the aircraft carrier Harry S. Truman comes under Houthi attack, it has to retreat and go back. Now, this is about how scale sometimes becomes a hobbler, especially in the modern world today. So we're living in times, when, because of changing circumstances, there are shifts, there are major shifts, and where the true measure of power is not really size. It is actually the ability to be resilient. Resilience becomes a true measure of power. And that is the kind of world which we're heading into in many ways. And what does it mean also at a conceptual level, at a deeper conceptual level? There is this whole idea of understanding the world in terms of labels and dichotomies and saying, okay, country A is a democracy, it has free markets, country B is not a democracy, it does not have free markets. And I would like to quote academician Wei Shai when he says, things change. China is not what it was 30 years ago, 10 years ago. Taiwan is not what it was. The US is not what it was 20 years ago, a generation ago. It's transformed, it's changed. So the only thing permanent in this world is impermanence, change. And that is one concept which you need to start thinking of this new way of handling the world we are living in today. So this entire idea of breaking up everything into this Cartesian, it's actually a power play of labeling and calling someone good, someone bad, someone evil. We are all a mixture of everything. So nobody is perfect. No country is perfect. No nation is perfect. We all have our defects. We all have our deficiencies. So constructing things, labeling them, pushing them behind an iron curtain or pushing them behind a bamboo curtain, there's a problem. There's a problem with that approach. And resilience is actually about conceptually moving beyond these dichotomies which we've created. These false narratives of power which are many times created to exert dominion and control, because there is politics within these narratives. Narratives are about exertion of power. So going behind them, examining them, breaking them down becomes extremely important. And when we start off looking at this non-binary way of looking at things, then we come back to the old philosophers, we come back to Heraclitus, who said, you don't step in the same river twice. And that's what the Buddha also says. The essence of the river remains, the name of the river remains, its essence changes every day. And if in that extremely dynamic situation, that is where we are really living, each situation contains the seeds of its opposite. It is the yin and the yang in Taoism. That is where real change emerges from. And opposites, paradoxes, are actually about bringing very, very different things together, on seeing the larger picture and growing and moving, transcending onto a higher level. And that is actually, I think we are in a phase of the world where that is going to be happening over the next 1 or 2 decades. It's going to take time. It's going to be a difficult process. The other idea is the idea, again, of interdependence. You can this whole idea of, okay, there is one cell, there's one thing outside, the world is interconnected. We are determined by everyone around us. We cannot run away. To think that we can become closed loops with everything within this particular supply chain, all within national borders, is ridiculous. It will never happen. So we are going to be depending upon each other. So how do we live with these kinds of dependency? Which is really going to be the essence of reality. Are we going to, as some excellent suggestions came, Mayor Chang said, and I was love the idea, that you build smart, you build modular. Yes, supply chains will need to reconfigure. So how do you build smarter, more modular supply chains, which get in with, you find people, you find partners, there are interim arrangements, until you get back into a larger structure, which is going back into a bigger global governance. That is going to take time in this kind of situation. So in this complicated world, which we are finding ourselves in this very complex situation we're finding ourselves in, we are a world which is scarred by very difficult, conflicting histories. All of us have very deep conflicting histories. How do we transcend them? How do we move beyond those histories? And the only workable solution in many times in these situations, is probably a suboptimal solution, which one party or the other finds it's suboptimal. So how to get back to that process of dialogue? And that is where forums like this become extremely important in the idea of building that resilience for the new world. And that's why I'm so glad that CAPRI is doing this here in Taiwan, which has the right ecosystems to think these new ways, to create these new ways which can move forward in this different kind of a world, and not just move forward, but try and give it a shape. So that is all I'll say. Thank you, great work, and we look forward to coming back again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Joshi. Please take your seat. We also very much look forward to you coming back again next year, and also with more new friends and new faces. So this marks the official close of CAPRI's 3rd annual forum. On behalf of CAPRI, thank you again for taking part in today's discussions. Your presence and participation made this event truly meaningful. And let's give one final round of applause for all of our distinguished speakers and moderators for their fantastic job and contributing and bringing all kinds of different ideas and perspectives into today's forum.